me know when Giovanni joins and I'll. Thank you.
Okay. Can you all hear me?
I can hear you.
Great. Okay, welcome everyone who's joined us in person and everyone who's joined us. We can see you all on our screen. And welcome to the first fully in-person quarterly meeting of the California Truth and Healing Council here on Ohlone lands. My name is Christina Snider, and I'm a member of the Dry Creek Rancheria Band of Pomo Indians and the Tribal Affairs Secretary for Governor Gavin Newsom. A huge thank you to our hosts here. We very much appreciate everything you've done to have us meet here. And I'm going to go through a few housekeeping items before we get started today. First, we are recording and live streaming this meeting via Zoom and the Office of Tribal Affairs YouTube channel. Participation information is available at tribalaffairs.ca.gov/CTHC/meetings. For those interested in following updates of the council, ongoing updates, including listening session recordings and the listening session summary documents, are available at the California Truth and Healing Council updates blog at catruthandhealing.com. You can also get updates for events by following the Governor's Office of Tribal Affairs on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter. Additional details, including meeting dates, agendas, and background information, are available at tribalaffairs.ca.gov/CTHC. I'd also like to remind everyone that in joining us here today, you agreed to adhere to the council's principles for respectful engagement, which I'll walk through in a moment. A copy of those principles is available for your use and review at tribalaffairs.ca.gov/CTHC. Refusal to adhere to these principles, which apply to all participants, including governing council members, staff, and community members, whether present or not, may result in your removal from today's convening. If you feel at any time that you need to step out or you feel that you may be in need of assistance, please find one of our team. Loretta's over there, Michael's over there, and we will help you get some air. In order to create a space where participants feel welcomed, respected, and able to speak comfortably, we'll uphold the following principles in all convenings of the council. We ask that all participants work towards sharing in their stewardship. If you're a participant here today, we ask that you engage in the work of the council and with others in an open and respectful way. Engage in behaviors that will make others feel welcome and take care of your emotional, mental, spiritual, and physical well-being, and then seek support as you need it. I'm not going to go through the full principles, but you can find them online. And if you joined us yesterday, you heard them in full. But again, if we see any sort of kind of violation of the principles and of creating a safe space here, we will ask you to step out, and then we can talk to you a bit more about how to rejoin the meeting as well. Okay, so with that, we will do a roll call to establish quorum in case the council wants to take action on any items here today. From the Central Region, Councilmember Khan, not present. Councilmember Kessler-Mata, not present. Councilmember Maccaro.
No, Neva, I'm here. Thank you.
Councilmember Manzano. It's not, okay, it's not present. From the Eastern Region, Councilmember Burris.
Present.
Councilmember Perrone.
Present.
Councilmember Sisk.
Here.
And Councilmember Roberts is not present. From the Northern Region, Councilmember Bajorquez. Councilmember Harper. Do not see her, but I thought she joined. Councilmember Myers. And Councilmember Giovanetti, I think, will join later. From the Southern Region, Councilmember Elliot Santos, is not present. Councilmember Lucas.
I'm with you.
Morning, Councilmember. Councilmember Turner. He's not present. And Councilmember Phelps.
Present.
Councilmember Phelps, for the purposes of today, if we take any action, you will be a voting member. Okey doke. We will very quickly catch up on our schedule and we will start with Vice Chair Variano and Ms. Gomez from the Muwekma Ohlone tribe.
Tuhi, Ganak Rakat, Monica Viariano, Wetcherskuchush, Muwekma Bulbulam, San Francisco Bay Area Tak. Good day. I greet you in our native Chochenyo language. My name is Monica Viariano. I am the Vice Chairwoman for the Muwekma Ohlone tribe of the San Francisco Bay Area. Kanamin Kanak Apakush Joel, Chocho Kanak Papakush Albert, Chocho Kanak Melekush Mercedes, Kanak Suyakma Marin. I am the daughter of Joel Ariano, granddaughter of Albert Marin Ariano, and great-granddaughter of Mercedes Marin. I am from the Marin lineage. My native ancestors were baptized at Mission San Jose going back to the year 1814, when my great-great-great-grandmother, Efrena Kinatole, was missionized into Mission San Jose from her village on the north side excuse me, of the Carquinez Strait. Her husband, Liberato Colpexi, from the Saclan and Halquin tribes, was baptized at Mission San Francisco in 1801. With me today is Muwekma Ohlone tribal member, former tribal councilwoman Gloria E. Gomez. We are Muwekma Ohlone. Welcome to Muwekma's ancestral homeland, where we are born. Menemu nepetuhi extuyakma Muwekma, maki mak Muwekma wulbulam, apoy makware, mani makiswi. On behalf of our people, Muwekma La Gente, we would like to offer an official welcoming to our ancestral homeland within this ethno-historic tribal territory of the Yelamu, Aramay, Salson, and Lamchin Ramaitush San Francisco Costanoan Ohlone-speaking tribal groups of the San Francisco Peninsula. We welcome everyone in attendance at the Truth and Healing Council meeting in the city of San Francisco, California, to our Holsheware, our beautiful ancestral homeland. Thank you. And now we would like to share a little bit about Muwekma's history and explain why today we are still struggling to regain our inherent and rightful recognition as an American Indian tribe. The Muwekma Ohlone tribe today is comprised of all the known surviving American Indian lineages aboriginal to the San Francisco Bay region, who trace their ethno-historic origins from the indigenous tribes who continuously occupied these lands for 12,000 years. Upon arrival of the Spanish in the 1700s, all Muwekma members were involuntarily confined at 3 Bay Area missions: Mission San Jose, Mission Santa Clara, and Mission Dolores in San Francisco. After the secularization of the missions in 1834, most of the mission Indians who were rounded up from outside the Ohlone-speaking territories left the area, returning to their non-Ohlone villages. But those who stayed in former Ohlone-speaking territory coalesced into a distinct community living in 2 Indian rancherias in Pleasanton and Niles, where they were able to revive indigenous and cultural practices such as the sweat lodge and ceremonial dances. They were made up of those who came from Ohlone-speaking villages, but also Miwok, Yokut, Wapo, and Patwin-speaking tribes. These 2 rancherias were very close to each other and formed a single, distinct community that was well known locally. Phoebe Apperson Hearst and her husband, U.S. Senator George Hearst, purchased our Alisal Rancheria in the 1880s. Later, she funded the anthropology department at UC Berkeley and invited renowned anthropologist Alfred L. Kroeber to interview our elders still living there. Our landless tribal community was included in the federal Indian censuses of 1900 and 1910, and the special Indian censuses of 1905 to 1906. We were placed under the jurisdiction of special California Indian agents and later the Reno and Sacramento superintendent. In 1910, Kroeber published vocabulary where our elders were included, and the term Muwekma, which means the people, was also included. John Peabody Harrington, a linguist with the Smithsonian Institution, also interviewed our elders in the 1920s and 1930s. He too recorded the linguistic term Muwekma. The word was spoken by Maria de los Angeles Colos, Angela. Her parents married at Mission Santa Clara in 1838, and she was born on the Bernal Rancho in the Santa Teresa Hills in 1839. Angela later married a Clareño Indian named Ramondo Bernal Sonol in 1873. She told Harrington that Clareños were much intermarried with the Chocheños, Indians from Mission San Jose. The dialects were similar. Being identified on the 1906 census and thereafter being named in 1914, 1923, and again in 1927 on the list of tribes to receive land by Congress effectively gave the Muwekma people acknowledgement, also known as recognition, as an American Indian tribe. Just to be clear, Muwekma's existence and identity do not depend on federal recognition or acknowledgement. The community, meaning the people, make up the tribe, and we were a tribal community long before the federal government recognized us. Federal recognition does not create tribes. It recognizes social political communities that predate the United States, and it creates a trust relationship between the tribe and the federal government, which entitles tribes and our members to certain federal benefits and triggers the operation of a whole body of US law involving respect for tribal sovereignty, including the protection and repatriation of our ancestral remains. Tribal nations ceded millions of acres of land that made the United States what it is today, and in return received the guarantee of ongoing self-government on their own tribal lands. This right of sovereignty and self-determination was promised in perpetuity to tribal nations, and that government-to-government relationship can only be terminated by Congress. The facts cannot be disputed. Muwekma became federally recognized in the early 1900s, and our status was never terminated by Congress or any other administrative means. But because of the negligence of the Bureau of Indian Affairs, we were left off the first official list of recognized tribes in 1978. And we have spent the last 40 years fighting for the restoration of our status. We have 600 enrolled tribal members who are directly descended from the previously federally recognized tribe. In a September 21st, 2006 decision, Muwekma Tribe versus Kempthorne, the federal district court for the District of Columbia affirmed our legitimacy, stating the following facts are not in dispute. Muwekma is a group of American Indians indigenous to the San Francisco Bay Area, the members of which are direct descendants of the historical Mission San Jose tribe, also known as the Pleasanton or Verona Band of Alameda County, from 1914 to 1927. The Verona Band was recognized by the federal government as an American Indian tribe. Neither Congress nor any executive agency ever formally withdrew federal recognition of the Verona Band, end quote. After validating our long presence in the San Francisco Bay Area, Stanford and Illinois researchers recently published a 7-year genomic study that connected present-day Muwekma Tribal Council members to 2,000-year-old Ohlone burials, which proves what the tribe has been saying for decades, that we are the people from the San Francisco Bay Area. We have thousands of years of human history on these lands, and we are still here today. Although we were known locally by many names, Mission San Jose Indians, Pleasanton Indians, Ohlone Indians, in 1914, the Indian Agency, without informing the tribe or anyone else, labeled us Verona Band, after a railroad station built for Senator George Hearst and his wife, Phoebe Apperson Hearst. Even though the Verona Band was listed in 1914, 1923, and again in 1927 on the list of tribes to receive land, an Indian agent without the benefit of a site visit or needs assessment reported the tribe was not in need of land and removed Verona Band from the list of tribes to receive land. These two departmental actions or administrative errors of mislabeling the tribe as Verona Band and refusing to buy us a land base that was mandated by Congress was the beginning of our political erasure or disenfranchisement. Although the Bureau of Indian Affairs has admitted that Muwekma was acknowledged as a federally recognized tribe in 1927 and that our status was never terminated by Congress, they still neglect to place our tribe on the first official 1978 list of federally recognized tribes. And today they still refuse to correct their error by reaffirming our tribal status. But the BIA has in the past corrected departmental errors and reaffirmed the status of other California tribes like Ayllón, Lower Lake, and Tejon. These other tribes had all been previously recognized, had never been terminated, continued to exist to present day, and had been left off the 1978 list, just like Muwekma. So why not reaffirm Muwekma? After 40 years of struggling to clarify our status, we now realize evidence and facts don't matter to those in power. We once believed the department's indifference and neglect was to blame, but now we see the purposeful actions that led to our erasure and the actions that continue today to silence our voices. When BAR undertook this initial review of the Muwekma case, it determined that the tribe had been unambiguously recognized between 1914 and 1927, when it was mentioned in the Indian agency records as the Verona Band. The agency then instructed the tribe not to submit material prior to that date, as the agency would not look at it. Gloria?
Gloria. Hello, my name is Gloria and I will continue. Can everybody hear me? Okay. It is true that the 1994 Federal Acknowledgement Process regulations did not require that information pertaining to the period before a petitioner was unambiguously recognized and submitted. However, this does not mean that historical information bears upon the evidence during and after unambiguous recognition could not be submitted by the petitioner. BAR told Muwekma to focus on the period after 1927. So the lack of historical information fatally handicapped the tribe's ability to present critical information about our functioning and continuity in the 20th century. In addition, not looking at the period before 1914 obscured the fact that the tribe was recognized in 1905, 1906, when Charles Kelsey was appointed special agent by Congress and was charged with compiling a report regarding California Indian groups, which are in need of land. Kelsey's census was used by Congress to appropriate funds for the purchase of land for these landless Indians. The Indians at Pleasanton and Niles in Alameda County, two settlements that had a long history of Muwekma occupation, were identified in the Kelsey census. The fact that BAR specifically told the Muwekma tribe not to submit material prior to the period when BAR ascertained that the Verona Band was recognized from 1914 to 1927, and that the agency would not even look at this material was in error. Not only did the Federal Acknowledgement Process regulations not preclude petitioners from submitting such background information, but the earlier historical information is direct material as to why Muwekma tribal members were living there in the early 1900s and how we interacted during this period as well as afterwards. The historical information also sheds light on the fact that BAR's conclusion that the tribe was only recognized between 1914 to 1927 was inaccurate. In fact, the tribe was recognized before and after 1914 to 1927. The implications of the tribe being recognized for a longer period than admitted by BAR are substantial, inasmuch as BAR precluded the earlier history from being presented. The agency's evidentiary record is silent as to why the individuals identified on the Kelsey census were living in Pleasanton and Niles to begin with, and what their relationship was to each other during and after 1905 to 1906. It is not merely how the tribal members were related genealogically to one another that is important, but also their social and political ties to one another, as expressed in who served as godparents for whom, and what did that entail for the lifetime of the godparent and godchild. These relationships even predated 1905 and endured after 1927. The fact that Barr only wanted to start the evidentiary record of the Muwekma tribe in 1914 also meant that how the tribe was referred to by historians, linguists, not non-Indian locals, as well as by the tribal members themselves in the 19th century, as well as in the 20th century, was again excluded by Barr. Had the Muwekma tribe been permitted to include its history before 1914, it would have been obvious that the tribe had long been called many things, depending on the context. The Mission San Jose tribe, band or Indians, the Pleasanton Indians, the local Ohlone Indians, the local tribe or Indians, the Ohlone band or tribe, and Nussbaumers Indians or tribe, and the Muwekma Ohlone tribe, after the tribe formally organized in the 20th century. What the tribe was never called by anyone outside of the Indian Agency, and the latter only did so for a few years, was the Verona Band. That no one ever referred to the tribe outside of the Indian Agency after 1927 was the Verona Band was hardly surprising, and certainly not indicative that the tribe did not exist. To the contrary, historians, linguists, local non-Indians, and tribal members continue to use the various names noted above, which had been used throughout our history, including in some BIA records. If Barr's administrative record only states that the tribe was recognized between 1914 to 1927 without the historical information that the Muwekma ancestors were living on land that they had continuously occupied since before the mission period, and how tribal members intermarried and served as godparents for one another throughout the 19th century and into the 20th century, then it may be easier to assume that the tribe inexplicably withered away, quote unquote, once a derelict superintendent of the Sacramento Indian Agency failed to purchase land for the mistakenly labeled Verona Band in 1927. Yet what makes a tribe, quote unquote, is not the fact that some Indian people live near one another. Instead, it's the individuals, historical and present relationships to one another that distinguish an American Indian tribe from non-Indians and from other tribes. These mistakes made in assessing our historical evidence were purposeful actions by the BIA and by others attempting to erase our history and our existence. These actions continue today in attempts to silence our voices. The fact that Muwekma leaders were not invited to sit on the Truth and Healing Council is a testament to the continuation of our political erasure. The state of California and Governor Newsom specifically is well aware of Muwekma's existence. And yet there's pressure from other recognized tribes who sit to exclude Muwekma from the council in order to deny us any form of legitimacy as a tribal nation. Governor Newsom created a Truth and Healing Council to provide an avenue for California natives to clarify the record, to bring the truth of California's mistreatment of Native Americans into the open, not to hide the truth by excluding Muwekma from participating. However, we do appreciate being invited today. Its purpose was to correct the historical record and acknowledge the wrongdoing. But in choosing to ignore our historical record and ignore the wrong done to the Muwekma people is not right. When State Senator Dave Cortese and 5 other California Assembly members co-authored a resolution, SGR 13, that would have supported the restoration of our status, the bill was killed in the governmental organization committee because of intense lobbying from California gaming tribes. The refusal to vote on SGR 13 is evidence plain as day that this has never been about our evidence or legitimacy. It has always been about politics and special interests, 2 things that should never have a place in the process of tribal recognition. The refusal to vote on a resolution, regardless of the 10,000 signatures who signed our petition that urged them to do so, regardless of the overwhelming support our resolution had from Bay Area environmental and conservation groups, religious organizations, universities, anthropologists, historians, local and state agencies, national and local community organizations, all from the very communities that these senators serve. The only opposition to our resolution was the California gaming tribes, who lobbied Chairman Dodd to kill our resolution in the committee. This isn't the way transparent government and democracy is supposed to work. Our supporters are understandably angry, but the Muwekma people are not surprised. We are used to being ignored. We're used to being silenced, But that does not mean we are giving up. We have been fighting for 40 years to clarify our status, not for money or casinos. We have been fighting, will continue to fight for the rights of our children, for the rights of their children to be free and self-governing. So no, we will not die off, and no, we will not go away simply because of our Native relatives who have become infected with the disease of possession and money. So our fellow Native brothers and sisters, we ask you to use truth and justice as you guide your principles. Your principles guide you, and stop blocking legitimate tribes like Muwekma from getting the same rights and benefits your people enjoy. Money and greed will only work to separate and divide people, our people. We must join together in the protection of our collective sovereignty. The state of California has a voice, and they must use it in the course of correcting its historical injustices against our people. It was California's war of extermination against our people that was the root cause of the land displacement, the homelessness and the poverty that led to our recognized status being in question in the first place. But in today's era of social and racial justice, it's time for the Muwekma Ohlone tribe of the San Francisco Bay Area to finally have our sovereignty restored. And those who continue to stay silent during our political erasure are complicit in our injustice. The elected officials who ignore our calls to help restore our status are also complicit in our injustice. I thank you for this time. We thank you for this time and allowing us to share in our struggles. Kishwa Chekinan, thank you.
Oh.
Thank you both for sharing. And I know that you had mentioned that you may not be able to do Q&A, but if anyone from the Governing Council has any questions at this time, please feel free to jump in. And then for those of you who have public comment cards, if you could pass them down to the end of your aisle on that side, we'll have Anella collect them. Councilmember Macaro. You're muted.
Okay, sorry about that. Yeah, I'd like to thank both Muwekma representatives for presenting today. I need a clarification on, I think it was this last presentation by Ms. Gomez. In 1978, that's when Muwekma was left off the list. Is that correct? Did I hear that right? It was, and that to be clear, that was the is that the annual publication of federally recognized tribes list? I don't know if who wants to answer that.
I'll let her.
Yes,
Okay.
that's correct.
Okay. It's a momentous year for that, evidently. And then you mentioned, I heard it 2 or 3 times, a reference to the year 1914. What happened there? Was there another list at that point?
I believe that was a census.
Okay. And the significance of what happened with the census was what? I missed that.
That we were on that census. So we were
Okay.
noted as being part of that census.
Right. Okay. Thank you for those clarifications. Appreciate that.
Sure. So thank you, everybody.
I have a question. I have a question. This is Councilmember Giovanetti. I want to ask, did Kelsey, it's been a long time since I read the Kelsey census. Did Kelsey actually come and talk to the Ohlone or at any point? Did he do an actual census with your folks?
Yes.
How many people did he identify?
I believe at the time there were 30, but I could be wrong. I could follow up on that actual number.
That would still be significant with the carnage done to your people.
Yes, I mean, the fact that we were named, that's the point. You know, we were on these lists and then somehow miraculously left off.
I think some of the insanity of this work is, I think about volume 8, the Handbook of North American Indians, the book on California, where it talks about, I think the Bureau or the Interior identified 300 distinctive tribes in California, and then I'm not sure if the federal government always used that as a cover or what, just because we had so many tribes because we were so big here in California.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Rhetorical question or statement, but I appreciate this struggle because I just think about the unfairness of the manifest injustice of bar requiring peoples who have not been recognized in the 20th century to supposedly have records of their council meetings, is so ludicrous.
Exactly. Exactly. Thank you.
Any other governing council questions at this time? Okay, then. And then as a reminder, if you have a comment for any point in this agenda, please feel free to take a public comment card and let us know which agenda item that you are wanting to speak on. And if it's just general, you can put general and we'll have that then.
Christina,
Yes,
Councilmember Myers has his hand up.
thank you.
I just want to say thank you for the time this morning and very much appreciate the story of the tribe and how far you've come and how far you've come along, and much appreciated for taking your time and explaining this today to the council. This was one of the reasons I wanted to be on the council, is to hear where we're at, to help us guide us where we're going. So it's with my full heart I say thank you and appreciate you this morning.
Kishore Chekinan, thank you.
Shorshet Keenan, we thank you all for listening to us today. It is very emotional and it is very, heartfelt when we speak, because it has to do with thousands of years, of our people being here, and then having to talk about today, still dealing with our recognition, our reaffirmation. It's terrible what we have to go through on a daily basis to prove who we are. We're still here. The fact that we're still here, our families live here, they've never left. But we appreciate, the Truth and Healing Council listening to us today, and we hope you enjoy the rest of the meeting. Have a good day.
Good, Janila.
Welcome.
Councilmember Sisk?
Yeah, I'm just gonna, I knew Rosemary Cambro when these things first started, and the tribe there had pushed ahead as far as the recognition process and the application issues that were here. Now we're at 40 years later. The results of this tribe's efforts to become recognized over 40 years definitely impacts all other tribes that are applying. And the court decisions that were made on the history and condemning their ability to show, as far as I know, the commissioners were not allowed, they were not allowed to use commissioners' reports for the documentation of being here. Yet this tribe and all the other unrecognized tribes in the state have paid for, out of the claims case, the lands that make other tribes recognized out of the claims case. And so we have a real issue of legalities and putting us through 40 years of a black hole process that never intended to recognize Indians at all. And so I think it is up to the Truth and Healing Committee to address this issue and to deny that federal recognition through this process is even valid, because most of the tribes that are recognized would never go through, would never be able to prove
Right.
They are a tribe.
Yes, that's
And
right.
so we need to push for the California claims case and everybody who signed that, who has that case, and the members of the enrollment had to state what tribe they were from. It wasn't a random, I'm Indian, I think I'm Indian, and because there is a financial connection to the state of California and the recognized tribes. And 40 years is too long to go without benefits, without laws that help us to continue our ceremonies and hold our land and continue with our teachings of traditions and culture. It makes it very difficult. So
Yes.
I'm thinking that, we should make this some sort of an action item to address the issues of the unrecognized and the process that the federal government put on California Indians, because there are so many unrecognized tribes in the state that it is sinful. Thank you.
Thank you, council member, for that. And thank you for acknowledging Rosemary. She was both Monica and my mentor, and her daughter now is our chair, and we just keep pushing forward. But when we look back, I've dedicated half of my life to this work, and it's sad that we're still here, but what you said is so true. So thank you for sharing that.
Councilmember Harper.
Yes, I just want to say that I know it's frustrating to you and the Muwekma people and others who have not been federally recognized. And I really appreciate Monica and Gloria, you presenting your story to us and being so willing to share. I think this will be very, very helpful for informing our work. So thank you once again.
And thank you so much for saying that.
Councilmember Makara.
Yes, we just heard, I thought was a good argument about that came up out of the presentation here. And a suggestion for a follow-on from us, maybe even a call to action, to which I think the end game is at a minimum, probably a recommendation that comes from this. There are probably numerous recommendations. I mean, of course, our powers to as a council are what they are, but nonetheless, the recommendations or the calls to action that we come up with at the end, one of those should focus on these injustices or inequities that Muwekma has described being delisted, and the struggle for reaffirmation, and that there are other tribes in that circumstance. I think, as was just mentioned, I thought that was a very good suggestion. And so the follow-on to that could be, at least at a minimum, something that we send to the federal government, perhaps, that this is something they need to look at and help correct that inequity. That said, and I, like I said, I think that was an excellent point that was just made. I do think in the very next breath it was diminished, however, by the generalized swipe at federally recognized tribes in the state, that those tribes would not be able to prove that they are tribes or that they're Indians. I think that comment diminishes the work that we're doing here. It's broad, it's overgeneralization, and it wasn't appreciated by me being from a recognized tribe. We have a very documented and provable history, most of which exists in our songs and dates back to at least before the Ice Age. So, the provability of federally recognized tribes in the state, I don't think needs to be swiped at. The comment was a good one prior to that, and it stood on its own, and hopefully we will keep that there. So thank you.
Council member.
One more time.
Councilmember Giovanetti.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I wanted to say that I testified before the House with Rosemary Camry on federal recognition for unrecognized tribes in California. And it is extremely frustrating. I can't even find the words to characterize, persons listed on the California Indian Land Judgment, the final roll 72, who received the one-time payment of $660 for the theft of California in 1850 at statehood. That, we have for healthcare, we have the California set-asides under the Indian Healthcare Improvement Act that allow persons and their descendants of those listed on that final 72 California roll to enter tribal facilities and receive basic care, anywhere from a Band-Aid to, something, a little bit of care. But purchase referred care is not on the list for those persons. They can't receive. I'm 72 years old and I didn't learn about this myself until about 5 years ago, that there's even such a thing called preferred PRC. Can't even think of the acronym. I'm sorry, I'm trying to wake up. And so, but it includes everything from braces to, flying an individual to another hospital. And this class system that our people, so many of our California tribes, including Muwekma, live in, it really is disgusting that status quo could have ever come about. I want to also say that my tribe's history, the Tolowa people, we've suffered many massacres. They're documented. We were removed also by the United States at least 7 times to 3 reservations in 2 states, including an island in the Pacific Ocean twice. So we know about grief and abuse and genocide also. And so I thought that was a very strong statement also. But so thank you.
I'll check in, the member.
Thank you. And thank you for recognizing, our previous chairwoman, Rosemary Cambra. She did dedicate her life to this fight. And, she pushed it as long as she could and until she needed to retire. She needed to rest and enjoy the rest of her life, without this extra stress and drama, because it did take a toll on her. But she is still fighting with us in spirit and, supports our cause definitely wholeheartedly. But she did get us as far as she could. She was a force to be reckoned with. Started with gray hair, dark hair, and ended with white hair. So, she really dedicated a lot to her people. And, we are forever grateful for that. So thank you for recognizing her.
Thank you. And then I wanted to see if Councilmember Lucas had any comments, because I know that it may be challenging to have a raised hand.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, this subject truly bothers me because it doesn't end, and it just seems overwhelming. And I sit in a stupid category where some people think I've been terminated, other people, and I believe with the document that I've seen, we were never terminated. Congress needs to use clear, plain language when they terminate a tribe. That has not happened to many of us. That's why I keep stressing I'm concerned about those non-federally recognized Indians that are lost in society collectively. I've come to realize there's different categories of non-federally recognized Indians. It seems to me you have some groups that are well organized and still functioning as a tribe, where you have others that have gotten lost in the urban part, and those might be the ones that are hurting the most because they don't know who they are or where they came from, and so they get involved in drugs and alcohol, and we're really subjected to that addiction type of thing. I would like to see the Truth and Healing Council really focus in on how do we get United States Congress, because they're the ones at fault. I think California, the state of California, followed all the laws of the United States government. So it's a dual correction action as far as I'm concerned. Everybody's got a handout. Everybody's got a story, but this one goes to the depths of every Indian soul. And I learned more about the god awful hideousies of the annihilation of our people. We're calling it genocide today, but I just read recently again the American genocide, the California story, where the Modoc people finally got the skulls back. Are you still hearing me, or have I lost you?
No, we can hear you.
Okay, I heard some noise in the background. What bothers me is again, because of all this history, it goes hand in hand with the repatriation of our spirits. So, it's really a subject that we really need to sit down and concentrate on. I don't know that we can get all this done in less than 5 years if we want to do an honest job. But the bringing it to the surface, hopefully some corrections can be made. I know we need to constantly remember that it is our ancestors who suffered from this. I remember receiving a $600 check when I was a high school graduate. I bought a suit to graduate in. That's what I did with my money. But even at 18, it bothered me because that didn't belong to me. That really belonged to my great-grandmother and the people beyond that. So it's just, somebody used the word before, it's insane. It's hideous. And we need to get this corrected. So I don't know that I'll even live long enough, because that's the design. You create these little things and then the leadership changes and then nobody knows what's going on. So there has to be consistency. It has to be a timetable on this, and it has to be pure dedication that goes to this issue. And it has to be from all California Indians. We are all related, and we have our differences, but we need to get over the anger. We need to truly understand that this land was built, the United States of America was built on the blood of our ancestors. Of course, we did some hideous things too, but I would challenge anybody to say, what would you do if your home was being taken from you? So this is an insane process, an insane residue, and it has to be corrected to correct the moral and the spirit of our young people and those that are yet to be born. So I'm sorry to talk so long, but I don't know how else to articulate the pain that this subject brings to me. So thank you for that opportunity.
Thank you, Council Member. Council Member, oh, sorry.
Oh, I just want to say Kishore Chekinan, Council Member. Thank you.
Thank you.
Phelps.
Sorry, one more time.
Council Member Phelps.
Yes, I just wanted to thank our guests from the North Maloney. They've actually been guests on my university campus. I've had the pleasure of meeting them at various ceremonies, and I think reaching out like that has really helped them in spreading the news of their cause and gaining allies. Also, I think when we hear the story of this is a 40-year struggle on the part of that tribe. My own tribe lost its ancestral homeland, even though we're federally recognized over 100 years ago. And, we still, struggle to see if there's ever a chance that we could ever recapture that belonged to our ancestors. So I say that because although we have a 5-year charter from the state, these problems have taken centuries to develop. And even if we see the struggles of the Muwekma, what's been going on for a legal battle for 40 years, we're not going to solve anything in 5 years. We can make recommendations, but I think that it is
Wrong page.
Yeah. Wrong page.
something that we need to address when our 5 years is up is, do we continue this organization as an indigenously led organization or in league with the state? Because these problems are going to take many more decades, I hate to say that, to solve. And so when our charter is over, we do as a body have to think about how we're going to continue the struggle, because the struggle is going to take a very long time. I think we are eventually going to win it, because I think ultimately the people of California are a just people. They will understand and they will do the right thing, but it is going to take a long time. So again, when we are done with our charter, Gavin Newsom, the Governor Newsom has given us, we have to think about continuing on as an individual body. Thank you.
Case on council member.
Thank you.
Councilmember Giovanetti.
Thank you. I wanted to say that at some point in the discussion that there was a mention of I think a passive termination or de facto. I guess that could be called kind of the facts surrounding that would be a de facto passive termination of any group, Muwekma, of any group of California Indians. That I think there's significant federal case law that says there cannot be a passive termination. I'm not refuting what someone said in making that comment. That I think that it has to be explicit. I'm not sure if it's, Mr. Myers is on from UROC. Maybe he could comment, or anybody else who recalls that, but I think it has to be explicit. I think there have been some cases that entities have lost, states or whomever, who tried to make that claim. Oh yeah, they were terminated. Well, no, I think Congress has to make that determination. I just wanted to say that as a reminder. I hope that's the case.
This council member Lucas again. I wanted to reiterate that you're correct. Congress has to be specific in their language, using the language termination, and that has to be documented. So at least those are the documents I've seen, and I've yet to find that as far as the Laguna Band of Mission Indians. They recognized the Laguna Band of Mission Indians in 1947, 49. They listed us as the individual members. They listed the Laguna Indian Reservation, Mount Laguna, California. There is no language that I've been able to find that says we're terminated. So I think that's really one of the keys, but it's going to take people in the legal process to really look this out. And again, it's not just California. We're talking about Congress, United States Congress, all this stuff filtered down. It's just like throwing a rock in a pond. It ripples out, and California, because of the gold and all the beautiful land up here, man, they were like vultures, and they still are. If you don't believe me, start working with the cultural resource management companies and try and save your sacred sites, what few are left in Southern California. This stuff is continuing. It's just a different color. But I just wanted to reemphasize that as far as I understand. And from the research that I've done, Congress must be specific in their language when terminating a tribe. So thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Sisk, and then once we get through council member comments, we'd like to move to the next item in the interest of time.
I'm thinking just listening to all of the comments here that, one, the people who didn't get on the list, for whatever those reasons are, and they're pretty lame as to why tribes did not get on the list. But now the burden of proof is on those tribes, regardless, trying to find something where the Bureau didn't do the right thing, or list the right thing, or erased the right things, shredding documents. as one of the cases. But also, we need a commitment if the recognized tribes are truly going to help change this and bring truth and healing to the forefront here, then, we need a commitment from the recognized tribes. We need a commitment from NCAI and NARF and CILS. And there needs to be some funding. This tribe around here, the casino tribes around here, they fund all kinds of things in the county, but they don't fund the unrecognized efforts and things that need to be worked on. And so they need to also stop opposing our efforts to become recognized, stop interfering with the changes of the BIA, and let us in those meetings. I was kicked out of the meeting that the BIA process was going to be changed. 10 leaders were kicked out of that meeting, not just me, of making our input into the changes that were supposed to fast track recognition processes. So that's the other part, is that we don't get the same healthcare like Joe was talking about. We get the Band-Aids. We don't get flown to San Francisco for the MRIs, or we don't get those things. And yet the acknowledgement by the recognized tribes seems to not recognize the history that has been lived since 1980. The changes that were made and separated Indian people in the state from healthcare, educational benefits, for rights for our own ceremonial purposes, to whatever it is, now is being written into law by federally recognized tribes that you have to be federally recognized to get a language grant, to get EPA grants, to get any kind of help and assistance. And so I'm saying we need some commitments from recognized tribes in this state when you guys meet at NCAI and all of these places that are for federally recognized people, that you consider the hundreds of thousands of California Indians who don't get the benefits that your people get. And that 40 years is the disgrace. And for us to think that it's going to take decades more, that we're not even going to be alive, and it's still going to go on because nobody is approaching it. And the situation with the California claims case was that all the tribes come together and supported that change. Even that took 50 years. But you know what? The overnight erasure of this policy happened 1980 and was done by 1993. And people were erased and left off, and there was no real reason that was given, because termination is not the issue here. Because even terminated tribes on rancherias were unterminated and became a tribe. But the relationship of tribal members has been ignored. So anyway, I'm looking for, they have to stop opposing the tribal movements of the unrecognized people, because we need land back. We need processes. We need a trickle down process for educating our kids and getting healthcare for our elders, and all of this COVID money and stuff that we don't even get to help our tribal people. So we need the process for land back, for village life to occur, so that traditions and culture can be saved and not die out. We're not talking about paperwork to get federally recognized as the most important thing. It's to continue on into the future as a tribe. And that takes work, and that takes fighting the government all the time at all different levels. We are not represented by any legal councils. We're not represented by any Indian organizations. And we are not funded by anything. As far as, even Prop 27 and 26, it's like, well, nobody wants those to go through. But really, it doesn't really affect unrecognized tribes. we don't get anything anyway. We don't benefit from the casinos anyway. And so there has to be a coming together of the federally recognized tribes and take responsibility and assistance the way that you do with other community development projects. You know, they give 25,000 to the local swimming pool, you know, mural downtown. They give $5,000 to 20 businesses. So I know that, you know, maybe it's because there's no benefits to supporting unrecognized tribes, but maybe we need to figure out how that can benefit the recognized tribes, because there's a lot of land that needs to be protected. There's a lot of sacred sites that need to be protected. And it's the unrecognized people who are sitting on those lands and watching what's happening and fighting to stop tree removal, start for contamination of water systems and dams and the fish. You know, we're fighting for these things too. So maybe we can work together to help BIA and its amnesia to remember, you know, that California had all of these tribes before they came up with the policy to divide us all by federal recognized statuses and casino statuses. You know, so that's my my pitch for today. Thanks for listening.
Oh,
Thank you, council members. So with that, we're going to move to our next panel. And this is an in-person panel. If the folks from UC and Round Valley Indian Tribes would like to come up. And then is anyone in the podium? Then I'll just grab that mic. We're not trying to be far.
We did prepare a PowerPoint, but if it's easier, we could just talk to it.
Are you all able to hear?
Okay, can you hear us okay?
Okay.
Can you hear us? So we did prepare a short PowerPoint to go with our panel, but we could get started as that gets pulled up.
Sure, so I'm happy to start out. My name is David Fagman. I am the Chancellor and Dean here at the University of California Law School. And I'll just sort of give a little bit of background. I've learned a lot over the last, I guess it's now 5 years. I have been on the faculty here since 1987. My areas of interest are constitutional law and evidence. And then I became dean, acting dean back in 2016. And then I was appointed dean in 2017. And shortly after I became dean in 2017, it came to my knowledge that our founder, Sir Ernest Hastings, had committed atrocities that contributed to the genocide that was widespread not only in California, but in the United States. It was something that I did not know about prior to becoming dean. It was not something that was generally known among our community. In fact, when I speak to alumni, they never knew really very much about Judge Hastings himself. He was the first Chief Justice of the California Supreme Court. He was the Attorney General of the state of California. He was a very good friend of the governor, and he founded the school in 1878 with a $100,000
At the tone, please
grant.
record your message. When you've finished recording, you may hang up or press 1 for more options.
I think I'll press 1 for more options. So in, lost my place there. So Serenus Hastings founded the school in 1878. When I heard about what the actions he had committed, the crimes he had committed in the 1850s, I bought a couple of books on the California genocide to learn more about it. Hastings was mentioned in both those books, but it didn't really do a very deep dive into his culpability for what happened to the native Californians during the 19th century. So I created what came to be known as the Hastings Legacy Review Committee, which was a group of students, staff, faculty, alumni. I hired a historian who'd written one of the 2 books on the California genocide, Brendan Lindsay from Sacramento State. Asked him if he would write a paper that looked much more deeply into Judge Hastings' responsibility and then to report back to the committee that reported to me. The committee was led by the chair of our board of directors, who is appointed by the governor and oversees the college. That committee, together with myself, reached out to the Round Valley Indian tribes and the tribal council. I went up to Covelo in 2017 to meet and really to educate myself. I meant to find out as much as I could. I, again, was really ignorant about a lot of it. I grew up in New York, so a lot of the history that I knew was really an East Coast history. And so I needed to educate myself about the West Coast history, in particular, the culpability of the state of California. The Hastings Legacy Review Committee worked over the years. We made recommendations to the board of directors regarding restorative justice efforts, very much working with tribal members, both the tribal council and the Yuki committee that was created and designated by the tribal council. And again, this was a process of really learning over time. We went forward, I'll tell you quite candidly, without an expectation that we would change the name of the school, but that we had a responsibility as the college that was founded by somebody who had committed these atrocities in the 1850s to reach out and do what we could as a law school to work with tribal members in Round Valley and really much more generally around the state. And we intended to do that. We created a number of restorative justice efforts. And then these kinds of things, of course, have a life of their own. As you may all know, the New York Times had a major article at the end of October, beginning of November 2021, describing the actions of Serenus Hastings and the situation between the college and the tribal members. And we started getting calls from legislators asking us that we're a public university. We get our name from the state of California. We are in the education code and in the constitution of the state. So ultimately, the legislators have responsibility for the college. And they called, including in particular, Assembly Member James Ramos, reached out, offered his assistance to begin thinking through how we could best advance both our interests as a college and the interests of tribal members in Round Valley and the Yuki people. We had meetings in December 2021, which led to a set of meetings, really a drafting committee that was created with President Russ, Mona Olanison, the then representative of the Yuki committee, and James Ramos and myself. We met about a dozen times between January and May, really writing together Assembly Bill 1936. And then just to bring you up to date, the Assembly member or the Assembly bill has now been passed by both the Assembly and the Senate. It passed with no votes, 0 no votes, a couple of abstentions. And it now sits on the governor's desk awaiting his signature. So I'll leave it there. I will just say humbly that It has been quite an experience. I've learned a great deal through this process. I've learned about the limits of my knowledge. I've learned to be patient in understanding and listening and hearing the voices and perspectives of people that have very different backgrounds than I have. And I will continue. I hardly have figured it all out at this point in time. So I think this is a continuing effort over time. So I'm going to hand it off to my, do you want to give it to President Russ to follow up going next? Jim?
Thank you. My name is James Russ. I'm the current president of Round Valley Indian Tribes, and I'm happy to be here today. And I think that after we talk a little bit about it in these opening presentations, that we're going to have questions and answering. I'm happy to answer or try to answer any questions that anybody has. My colleague here is our vice president of our tribal council, Mr. Lewis Whipple. He joined us also today as well. And so thank you all for being here and willing to listen and hear about our trials and tribulations that our tribe's been going through. I just need to say first that I'm trying to get my brain back on track for this subject matter right here. So after the discussion this morning on unrecognized tribes, that is a lot of stuff. And that was very powerful statements made. And so it seems like there's a lot of work that needs to be done in Indian country for all of our tribes that are not federally recognized. And we know that there are many in a lot of our areas. So my heart goes out to them that are going through these 40-year struggles. It's just ridiculous. I think all of us could agree upon that. But anyway, so I'm trying to switch gears here, but that was a lot of information, and I appreciated all the comments that came through this morning. It's really deep, and it's a very serious area of recognition and dealing with the federal government. Anyway, so I think that Dean Fegman kind of summarized that up fairly well. From our part, from our tribal perspective, when we were approached by Dean Fegman, and he had established the legacy committee that was working on some of these things. And by the way, I wanted to just share with everybody that these are some of the books that have been printed, some of them very specifically about Round Valley, some of them, pretty general for California. Like, for example, Benjamin Madley, An American Genocide. So this is a book that has a lot of information. The good thing about Ben Madley and Brendan Lindsay is they do a lot of research. So they look into a lot of like not only the archives, but journal entries of people that were interviewed back then, our people in our area that were interviewed. So it's kind of cool that somebody took the time to do that and to put it in a book. These I ordered, this is kind of funny. These I ordered from our bookstore in Ukiah, California, which is near our closest big city to our reservation. Anyway, took a while to get them, but we finally got them. So, but anyway, this is the Ben Madley, An American Genocide. Most of us have probably heard about that. Another one is Brendan Lindsay that says California's Native American Genocide, 1846 to 1873, and it's called Murder State. This third one is written by Baumgartner, Killing for Land in Early California, and it specifically says Indian Blood at Round Valley, 1856 to 1863. So I haven't gone through all of these yet, but I'm in the process of doing that. There's a couple other books that I'd like to mention. One was written by a large ranch owner who he had a large ranch north of the valley of Round Valley. And he wrote a book that was called Genocide and Vendetta that was put out just for a short period of time. And then the guy that helped him put it together, they got into a lawsuit and now it's been discontinued. So that book is, a lot of our members have them, and those that have them are just holding on to them because they're not in publishing anymore. And I know my family used to have one, and my dad let somebody borrow it, and it magically grew legs and never came back. So we don't even have a copy of that. But the rancher's name was Estill Beard, and he owned a huge ranch north of the valley of Covelo. So anyway, there's a lot of good information on there. And like with any of these books, I know you guys may have books from your tribal areas. With any of them, I know in some, when it first came out, Genocide and Vendetta, our family and our family dinners, I remember our elders, I was just a little kid, but our elders were talking about, this was fairly accurate, or that wasn't fairly accurate, or presented in such a way that we remember it as tribal people. So any of these books, even given extensive research, there's always room for debate. So I just wanted to make that comment. The other one that I just noticed recently was called The King of, I believe it said Round Valley, The King of Round Valley. I don't have a copy of that yet, but as soon as I saw that and was showed a copy, I Googled it, and I'm trying to order that book too. So we're creating our own archives and our tribe as well in Round Valley. But anyway, these are some of the books that show some of the history. And, we talked a while ago during that earlier discussion, they talked about a lot of this stuff right here, the atrocities and all that. It was also a part of our process that we went through with Hastings College over the last 4 years. We talked about, or I guess longer now, we talked about the destruction of our tribal communities and the genocide that occurred. I think one of the ladies in the audience mentioned that earlier or on the screen, that now they use the term genocide, but really you could put whatever label you want on it, but basically it's just massacring, murdering Indian people. And so I need to mention that I give a lot of credit, seriously, to Dean Fagman for bringing this to the forefront. I mean, if he didn't take the steps that he took back in 2017, then I don't think we'd even be here today yet. That doesn't mean that this wouldn't have occurred and we would have pursued this, but I don't think we would be at the process that we are yet. I think it's also fair to mention that a lot of our people in Covelo also asked me the same question. Like, why did we have to go through San Luis and Ramos, and why did we have to go over to Sacramento and all that? So this was written, as the dean said, it was written into the ed code. So in order to change the name or anything else involved with that, you have to change the ed code. The only way to do that is to go through the California legislator. So I appreciate, and our tribe really appreciated that San Luis and Ramos became involved. And he kind of walked us through the legislative process and supported us a lot through this whole process. So anyway, I'd like to acknowledge San Luis and Ramos for his leadership and guidance and direction to our tribe through this process. I'm not exactly sure 100% what exactly we're supposed to be presenting on today. I think we're just supposed to be giving a background and kind of like with the process that we went through. So the dean mentioned earlier that they came to Covelo. I think you guys came to Covelo at least 4 or 5 times and met with us. And when I say us, it was pretty much open to the community. But one thing that we did establish, and I say we as a tribal council, was I felt very strongly, personally, that some of you may or may not know that Round Valley is made up of 7 distinct tribes that were pushed together, and formed our reservation. And the Yuki tribe being the indigenous to that area, but the other tribes were brought in. My descendant is from Wailaki, and that's north of the valley. So a lot of them were brought in to the valley as they established the reservation. But I take pride in saying not all of them were rounded up. And so some of our people lived and died free from not being under the subjugation of the American government. But anyway, and those things are talked about in my family, like within our dinners and when we have family get-togethers, we do talk about those things. And some of our elders have passed on now, but they're the ones that kept that legacy going. So I'm also, on my mother's side, I'm descendant from Namalaki, and they were brought over from Sacramento Valley. So we have some tribes maybe have 1 or 2 tribes that are in that tribe. And of course, that's difficult enough. But just think when you have 7 distinct tribes, when you try to get anything done. So for the most part, and I'm only saying this half jokingly, for the most part, we're pretty much satisfied with just fighting amongst ourselves and, hardly getting anything done. And I say that facetiously. But anyway, but we're working on it, and we're trying really hard to work together. This is a issue that I felt very strongly that the Yuki people were indigenous to the area. Some of the research that was done identified the villages in Eden Valley, which is just to the south, kind of southeast of our valley, that they were destroyed and just totally wiped out. So I felt very strongly, and I brought it to the council, that there are Yuki people that certainly can speak out for themselves. I don't need to speak out for them. They can speak out for themselves. So I asked the council if we could formulate like a Yuki committee that could work with, at first, the Hastings Legacy Committee, and then the Restorative Justice Committee as things progressed along over the next couple of years. So anyway, Dean Fagman mentioned Mona Wandasan. So Mona's in the audience today, and she was the first president or chair of that committee. And then, changes were made over time. Where I'm not exactly sure where they are right now, but that's one thing that we need to meet with the UK committee about internally and find out exactly where we are. And we did have that meeting scheduled a couple times, and it had to be rescheduled for funerals and different things like that. But we do have it on our agenda now that we need to meet with them and figure that stuff out. One thing I'd like to point out is it wasn't just, and we said this in our testimonies, myself and some of our other council members, it wasn't just working with Hastings, wasn't just about a name change. And some of our elders that came into our meetings, our UK elders included, spoke up and said exactly that every tribe has a story to tell, how we interacted with the federal government and policies, and in the state government when California became a state. So anyway, and I take that to heart because I know that all of us experience the same type of treatment. And so it's not like, oh, gee, they came in and they treated this tribe, said, well, we got to go after that tribe because they're such and such a tribe. But that tribe right there, they're cool, so we don't have to mess with them. I mean, when they came in, they just wiped out everybody. Didn't really matter what tribe you're from. They just saw that you're Indian and they tried to exterminate you. To a large extent, to some extent, that's still going on today, as we heard earlier in that discussion. But anyway, so then, so once we established the UK committee, our charge with the committee structure in our tribe is that we basically empowered them to meet, organize, and to have discussions with the Hastings committees, and to kind of lead those discussions, and then come back and talk to the council and figure out what do we need to do, where do we go from here. So anyway, so that's kind of how, from the tribal side, that's kind of how we got things started. And then we went through the process of meeting, going through a bill, AB 1936, that was introduced by Assemblyman Ramos. And we literally, after we started meeting on that, we literally went through that line by line. And Mona was involved with that. And Dean Fagman, myself, and Assemblyman Ramos, we literally went line by line to see if that's appropriate, if it needed to be changed or whatever. And I will tell you, those discussions, I would like to tell you that, oh gee, everything went really well and we got along really well. But that's not the truth. The truth is that there were some points that we debated very strongly. And when you're talking about this subject, one thing I always reminded, if I'm testifying before a committee or in those meetings, I always like to remind ourselves that when we're talking about these type of situations, these types of issues of genocide, it's not an easy subject to bring up. And there's always a lot of pros and cons, very differing opinions. And so it took that many meetings. I think we had like 10 or 12, and we just had to walk through that. Sometimes we'd come to the next meeting and we'd have to back up a little bit and say, well, you know what, we need to revisit this because now that we've had some time to think about it, we may need to make some changes. So anyway, for all the people that participated, like with Mona Wandasan, Dean Fagman, Ramos, who tried to keep us on track the best that he could. It wasn't an easy situation, and sometimes it gets very intense and very tense. And so I'd just like to acknowledge that we did go through that process, and it wasn't just a very easy process that you just walk in and agree upon everything. It'd be like having 100 Indians in a room and saying, oh gee, we walked in and agree upon everything on that too. And so, but anyway, I guess I just wanted to kind of summarize that, and I'm going to give our Vice President, Louis Whipple, a chance to chime in.
Good morning. Good morning or good afternoon. My name is Louis Whipple. I'm the Vice President of the Round Valley Indian Tribes. So I've been involved in this from the start with Dean Fagman came to Round Valley, and Jenny and Joe, she's over there. She came, we met, like Mr. President Russ said, it was, it wasn't all a cakewalk, some trying things, it's a little give and take here and there, but we built a trust. We got to know each other, and we got there. We got what we accomplished some things. And the school's names changed. We got some initiatives done. So, I thought we did pretty good for the Yuki people, Mona, Debs in there, Mickey. They had a lot of involvement. And they did real good. So, Mr. Russ, he's a real good help. Assemblyman Ramos, you got to give your hat off to him. He got in there and kind of mediated between us and got things solved, got us, got things going. He's the only Native American in the assemblyman, and first one, I think, and the only one. So, he's a real good help. Thank you, Dean.
Oh, thank you. And I'd like to introduce the Assistant Chancellor and Dean and my Chief of Staff, Jenny Kwan, who is really the principal ambassador through much of this process. So Jenny, say a few words.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, everyone. It's really nice to be here. And I want to thank Christina Snider and her team for inviting us here and allowing us to invite Round Valley to speak with us. I'll just, I feel like we've talked a bit about sort of our journey, and I'd like to leave room for if there are questions and things. So, one of the things that I jotted down was like kind of what I learned in this journey, and learning about the things that happened almost 200 years ago, and then being a professional and meeting people along the way. And one of the things that really struck me early on was the difference that every human faces in terms of healing with generational trauma. Dean Fagman and I, as we've gotten to know others, they know our story a little too, and neither of us came from means, and we have family journeys and histories, and we all sort of interpret those histories differently, and we carry those ancestral traumas differently, and we also heal differently. We heal at different rates, and we heal in different ways. And not surprisingly, over the years, we got to know many Yuki people, some who are in the room today. I see Nicole, Deb, Mona, and no one people speaks with one voice. And we did our best to hear all of those out. And that also meant that in wanting to do what we could as a small law school, it meant that no matter what decision we made, there was going to be some portion of that community who may not have chosen that decision. And so those were the kind of difficulties we sat with. There were people who felt very strongly about certain restorative justice efforts. There are folks who felt certain ways about the name change, and those who felt entirely the opposite way. And it was a real learning experience to sort of sit with all of those and then try to do the best thing that we could. And so I thank the members of the Round Valley Tribal Council for staying at the table with us and breaking bread, and every meeting learning a little bit more. I have to shout out to Linda Sachs as well, the Tribal Business Administrator at Round Valley. And hopefully in the end, at every meeting, we saw each other more as human beings trying to come together and do something. And as folks who run a college, we also have a student body and a community who all have very different views. And no matter what we decide, we will hear from the point where we disappointed some group. But we've always felt like not doing anything is not an option either. And so we've really tried our best to still move forward. As the slides show, we remain committed. And even when it's hard and confusing, we would like to keep the conversation going. And we look forward to a long-standing relationship. I have to acknowledge that we also have been on a journey that Professor Joe Correa will speak to a little bit later about the Ohlone families whose ancestral lands we sit on. And they also had opinions about our work with Round Valley as well. And so wanting to hear those voices as well. And again, no one speaks with one voice, but so those are some of my lessons learned and just general appreciation. And I thank you for allowing us to join your meeting today to speak.
Thank you, panelists. We very much appreciate hearing kind of the long process that you've went through, some of the challenges, and I'd like to open it up to, and can we stop? Okay, great. I'd like to open it up to the Governing Council if you have any comments or questions about this process. You will later today be able to hear from the Yuki Committee as well about how things that were presented to the legislature didn't end up the way that they were intended necessarily, and some challenges as you move forward in your proposals, how that might reflect or how that might change as it goes through a bigger process. Yeah.
I'm sorry, I just had a thought that I didn't finish a while ago when I mentioned that it wasn't just about a name change. The other things that we've been working on are the initiatives that were written into Senate Bill 1936. And those are the things that we talked about a lot. But in the process, one of the things that we realized, and I think both sides, I know that the vice chair of your board, Chip Robertson, brought it up numerous times in our discussions, was that we spent a lot of time focusing on the name change and very, very little time focusing on the initiatives once we brought those to the forefront and talked about them. So one of the things I need to mention is, because this is directly from the Tribal Council, is that we really wanted to focus on what the initiatives are. So the name change is super important, and we talked a lot about that. But what's moving forward with our future, our children, our grandchildren, is going to be the initiatives that kick in, and how we're working in a partnership with UC Hastings. I almost said Yuki Hastings, but anyway, but moving forward with them in the future, that would be a disaster. Anyway, moving forward with those initiatives and how they're going to affect our kids. Like we've talked about it a lot at the council meetings. This may not affect us because, you know, we're older, getting older every second, but it's going to affect our future generations. And that's what we're looking for, is like, how is this going to affect, and how can some reparations be made? And we've had open discussions, but we're looking forward to moving ahead with that and having those discussions. And the good news is that Hastings has already told us, and we've talked about it, the Yuki committee has submitted some additional, that these aren't just set in stone. The 21, I believe, that are in the bill, they're not set in stone. I know that Chip Robertson mentioned at one of our meetings that he has some suggestions that he believes that the tribe would like, and the Yuki committee would like to see in there. And the other thing that I mentioned is, you know, we came up with these now, but a year from now, 5 years from now, they may change. So what we think that would work right now, after we try it out, it may need to change. So we're giving ourselves some flexibility that these are organic. And if they need to be changed, then we'll work together to change those and to add some initiatives as we move forward. There may be things that we haven't even thought about yet that would be very beneficial to the tribe and perhaps UC Hastings as well. And so we're leaving ourselves some flexibility to actually add initiatives and at least get them on the table and discuss them. So I thought it was important to mention that.
Thank you, Chair. Councilmember Macaro.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. Learning something here. And I've been generally kind of following this, and I was excited to see how things ended up. So congratulations. I think we need to acknowledge the win against the system here that you all engaged in and we're part of. So it's heartening to see that this could happen and have a positive outcome for tribal people and on many levels. But my question is the change in the education code, does it apply generally to institutions, educational institutions throughout the state, or just public institutions? And then private ones are not covered by the ed code change? And is that therefore the change specific just to what is now the College of Law, San Francisco? Thank you.
So I'm happy to respond to that. The UC Hastings and Hastings College of the Law was in 92-200 of the Education Code. And so the amendment to the Education Code was specifically to the college. The way the original Education Code read was that the college would be named Hastings College of the Law, an affiliate of the University of California and the law department thereof. So we were the first law school in the University of California system. They simply crossed out the name Hastings, added San Francisco after College of the Law, and henceforth, after the governor signs and it goes into effect January 1st, 2023, we'll be known as University of California College of the Law, San Francisco, and in short, it would be UC Law, San Francisco. So it only applies to our one public institution. It doesn't apply to any other parts of the University of California, and it doesn't apply to any of the private universities.
And as a precedent, if in terms of as a general rule, that would be the same issue for any other University of California campus or California State campus. They similarly are entities of the state. I'll have to defer to others on what it means for public K through 12, but for statewide public universities and colleges, it would be a similar thing that private institutions would not need to engage in.
Okay, so insofar as the code goes, it's a narrow thing. It's fairly well boxed in, but it has a lot of value as, I think, as you use the word precedent, certainly as a model for how to make this change elsewhere throughout the state in a variety of institutions that go beyond higher education institutions. So again, thanks for the diligence and the fight that you guys carried, and we're able to put this forth now as a model of how to get this done, perhaps. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I would just add, I think Assemblymember Ramos very much saw it exactly how you just described it, that it would be a precedent for future opportunities to revisit many of these issues that need to be given attention. Thank you.
Additional council member comments? Councilmember Harper?
Yes, I just wanted to thank you for sharing the story of your journey, and it's been very encouraging, inspiring to hear about that, your establishment of the Restoration Justice Advisory Board and the initiatives you're working on. And I look forward to hearing more about these initiatives. And I'm wondering if you have a list or other background information, written background information about those initiatives you've worked on and the ones that you're going to continue to work on in the future.
Yeah, thank you for that question. There were 21 initial restorative justice efforts that were written into the bill. And then just before it went to the assembly, there were 4 additional added to it. They range from opportunities for the Indigenous Law Center here at the college to work with Round Valley. One of sort of our favorites is that we are looking forward to working with middle school and high school students to create a moot court or mock trial program, and that we would host students to come down to San Francisco to actually brief cases and argue cases in a courtroom, and really just create, as President Russ said, the idea here is to create a relationship, to create that trust and understanding, but then create opportunities for our students to mentor middle school and high school students, and to introduce them to debate and discussion in ways that will benefit their education. So if you call up AB 1936, they're actually listed seriatim in the bill So it's very, it's quite codified. And as President Russ said, we anticipate that this is going to grow organically. This is simply a foundation from which the two communities can really work going forward.
That's great. Thank you very much.
And I could send to Loretta, I realize I need to update our website since now the bill is signed and the initiatives are now multiplied a bit. But we do have a website that lists the historical review from 2016 to today, including the written reports that Professor Brendan Lindsay did. And so if for folks who are interested, there's links to the Indigenous Law Center, which launched just a couple of years ago as well. We fundraise as we can. We had law students do pro bono work this summer, actually supporting a lot of different California tribes, but focusing mostly on Round Valley. So a lot of this has taken years, and it's things now, years later, they start to roll out. And so I will send that website to you.
Great. Thank you very much.
Councilmember Myers.
Thanks for allowing me to ask a few questions here. Up here in Humboldt County, we just went through a university name change as well, from Humboldt State University to Cal Poly Humboldt. And I think we really saw that as a missed opportunity up in our neck of the woods to get the name changed to one that reflects the traditional language of the peoples whose lands the university is on. And we found it to be a frustrating process where we were brought in very, very late. By the time it was done, the Cal Poly Humboldt was already finished up and wrapped up, and that was the name. San Francisco law seems to be an interesting move for the name of the law school. Obviously better than Hastings for sure. The question, and if we want to get into this, if you don't want to get into this too much, I have for the panel here, can you help explain maybe a little bit how we landed on still using San Francisco, given the history with as well. And then the second question, we heard really amazing conversation from earlier this morning about Ohlone. Was there additional conversations between the tribes without the universities there, or was this only through the consultation process to come up with the naming?
So it's a great question. It's something that we wrestled with for a very long time, and it really came to the fore after the New York Times article, and when we really sat down with Assemblymember Ramos. I very much understand, and we Assemblymember Ramos very much wanted the Yuki committee to have a seat at the table. Round Valley Tribal Council obviously would have a seat at the table, and then the college had a seat at the table, and we had long conversations. It would then went to our board of directors. As I said, the board of directors is appointed by the governor, and the ultimate decision for the school, as well as for the University of California, was what should be our identity, what should be our name. And I don't think it was an easy decision. We heard from students, staff, faculty, alumni, literally thousands of folks. The vast majority of our community preferred the San Francisco name. The default position for the University of California is the local geographic designation. So UC San Diego, UC Santa Barbara, UC Los Angeles. And that our community wanted that. And I'll tell you, and I understand that it may not be a popular view, that, when somebody asks, what is your name? I think your answer to that is an ultimate statement of sovereignty. If you ask me my name and I say it's David, and you call me Davy, or you call me Bob, or you call me William, I would consider that to be an insult. And when we were first meeting with Round Valley and the Yuki committee, there were Yuki descendants that took the position that they didn't want to be called Yuki. Their preferred name was Wetumpka. And we said, we will call you by your preferred name because that is what is respect. And ultimately our community, we stand for, we have been in San Francisco for 144 years. Our identity, we are in, as you know, of course, the Civic Center. We are in the heart of San Francisco. Many of our graduates are difficult to separate from San Francisco history: Willie Brown, Kamala Harris, Jackie Spear. And so in the end, when the board was considering this question, they had before it the proposal from the Yuki committee to name the school after a Yuki language name, Pawanam. And ultimately they decided, and this would have been and was my recommendation, that we should name the school for the geographic designation that we are in. We do have, it's in the bill that if San Francisco would ever revisit its name in the future, the college would similarly reconsider its name. You know, again, as Jenny pointed out, there are a lot of voices in the room. There were Yuki descendants who took the position that they actually didn't want us to change the Hastings name, that they thought that true forgiving and true healing would come from recognizing that history and moving on. Again, that was just one perspective among others that were presented. And in the end, I will just say candidly, we were deciding as a university what we wanted our identity to be going forward. And it was San Francisco. And I know that's not popular among all folks, but it was very much the overwhelming choice of our immediate community.
But I think that's not to interrupt, but you know, we're at this Truth and Healing Council.
What he's saying.
Maybe can they, maybe from the Round Valley tribal leaders here, just that same question to you. Given what we just heard from, I forgot your name, I'm sorry.
David, you can just call me David.
David, that explanation from David. I gotta be honest, David, that makes my blood boil hearing you say those words right now. But I'll refrain from my own issues here. From Round Valley tribal leaders, it seems just even from your presentation, this was a bit of a frustrating process. Was there any thought for you folks to reach out to the Mwekma as well and have a separate conversation in general? You know, what are your thoughts on keeping it remaining with San Francisco?
So like I mentioned earlier, we empowered our Yuki committee to reach out and hold these discussions. And I know that they reached out to some of the tribes in the area and spoke directly to them. And so, and they did get some feedback from them. I also think it's important to mention that, you know, as the governing body of Round Valley, and I know Bill can attest to this as well. But anyway, as the council, we have a lot of people approaching us and talking to us about this issue. And the Yuki committee came up with the Poinam name. And so, but we also had, and that was fine. That's what we asked them to do, was to work on that, and they did. And they came up with that name. It took a little bit of time, but they ultimately came up with that name. But anyway, but we also have some of our own tribal members that live in Round Valley or live outside of Round Valley that were also providing us input. And some of them said that they were okay with the UC San Francisco, you know, College of the Law, San Francisco. And so they told us that directly at our council meetings, in written text messages or emails. And so we had, as all of you know that sit on boards or councils, you have all these differing opinions. So we have to, as a governing body, there's 7 of us, we have to kind of wade through that too and figure out what's the best, you know, moving forward. And so it's not easy. And we've had many discussions on this. I think we met with the board of directors at least 3 times, including the last meeting that the vote was taken. But anyway, so it wasn't something that we took lightly. And of course, no matter if you're on a tribal council or committee or board, no matter what you do, you're not going to please everybody, right? And so we just had to look at the best path forward, knowing ultimately that this decision rested with the UC, their board, UC Hastings board, now called UC College of the Law, San Francisco. But anyway, and I have some dealings previously with the UC system, and the Round Valley used to be in the MESA program, and I don't want to get on a tangent here, but I can tell you that during, and this was years ago when I worked for our education center, I can tell you that it wasn't an easy process. It was fairly ruthless. And those education centers that came forward and expressed our ideas with them, we met with one of the vice chancellors of the UC system. And the next thing that happened, to make a long story short, the next thing that happened was those of us that came forward and met with them, they basically kicked us out, said, you're no longer a MESA program, you can no longer use our name and all that. Prior to that, we had a really good program in Round Valley where our kids would do science and mathematics tasks, and we would compete with other high schools, you know, down in San Luis Obispo, where they held the annual meetings and stuff. And our kids from a very small school, our kids did very well in those. I felt that it was a really good program. A lot of our parents felt that it was a really good program. And when we pushed our issues forward, which I won't go into because we don't have time today, but we were just told, you guys are no longer a part of this MESA program. You can't use the MESA name. You can't use UC system name at all. So I do have some previous experience, and knowing that, you know, we still met and we still tried to push our agenda forward, that we want a name change. Ultimately, the name was changed. It wasn't given the Yuki name that the Yuki committee pushed forward, but one thing that we can say for sure is that Hastings is no longer on the name of the school. And some people felt that that was good. Some people still felt that that was bad. I mean, in one of our testimonies, there was a gentleman that called in on the phone. I won't forget this because it's still ringing in my ears, is that he introduced himself as an Indian student that went to Hastings, and he totally opposed the name. And I was like, you know, why would you do that? But he said when he spent a lot of money and time, you know, working for his degree, and when he got his diploma, he wanted it to say UC Hastings School of Law. And so, I mean, that was one opinion, but he's voiced that. He called in to the meeting, you know, just like some of these folks are, and he voiced that very, very loudly. So as a governing body in Round Valley, we have all these different opinions. We even have some of our own Yuki people that said, these other Yuki people, they're not from Eden Valley. We should be the ones that you guys are talking to exclusively. And so I disagree with that personally, but anyway, but we listen to them. I mean, that's part of our job, you know, is to hear the input and to hear what people have to say. So we gave them ample opportunity to do that. And we've heard a lot of differing opinions, and it was a long process. And I know that that wasn't exactly the name change that wanted to be heard, but ultimately the decision did lie, I believe, with the UC Hastings board. And they were open to listening to all of the input. We had numerous opportunities just to talk to them. And so anyway, that's kind of how that ended up. I hope that answered your question.
Thank you, Chair. And for council members, we are getting a bit pressed for time and have a 12:30 hard stop. So I want to make sure that additional questions and comments are respectful of that. And we do have some public comments, but we will come back to this issue in 2 panels. So I'll defer a few, but I do want, one is a question, is there going to be free tuition like other UC colleges?
We are following the University of California policy on that issue. Yes.
Great, thank you. Councilmember Macaro?
Yes, thank you. I'll be as concise as I can. I'd like to acknowledge on a different level, the name change itself is significant. When you step back and you look at the UC and its actions toward tribal communities in California, as well as Indian people, I think it's important to, I think, give some kudos to the Dean, David, and your role as an individual and being a proponent of doing the right thing and resetting the scales of both justice and equity in here, absolutely important. And I say that because I want to draw a contrast elsewhere in the UC system with regard to NAGPRA and how the UC system, I'll highlight the Phoebe Hearst Museum and Cal Berkeley as having people there who have been bad actors for decades. NAGPRA has been on the books. It's been federal law since 1990. And here we are 42 years later, and we're still haggling with the UC system and Phoebe Hearst in particular, trying to repatriate our ancestors collectively throughout the state. And they've used insidious loopholes of their own creation to be scofflaw with NAGPRA. So there's this contrast. And I think the end of this comment is that we would like actions like this not to be one-offs, but to actually be the beginnings of true systematic change. And somewhere in our outcomes here as a council, hopefully we will have at least a statement and a series of recommendations on how that happens, how that occurs. So thank you.
Thank you, council member. With that, thank you all for this panel. I know we have some public comments on this, but we will take them at the end just to make sure that our panelists can all join. So again, thank you all. Really appreciate your sharing. And if you're around still, hopefully we can have some engagement after this too.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
I just want to mention one last thing while we're breaking here. It was quite an experience, and we did look at it, and Assemblyman Ramos mentioned that this may be a stepping stone for other tribes. And so I know I've talked to our tribal council. We're more than happy to talk to any tribe that wants to know like what our experience was and how we did that, or what we learned or anything. So even though we had very little time today to talk about it, we're open to talking to any tribe. So please give us a call in Round Valley. We're in the book. We're not going anywhere. We've been there for millions of years.
And
So,
if the council's interested in it, we could potentially have someone go and do a case study on this specific process.
Thank
Yes,
you very
please.
much.
So our next panel, and if folks need water, snacks, anything, please feel free to come and go. We'll kind of go through the break just because in the interest of time, we want to hear from everyone. I'd like to invite up Professor Carrillo. And then virtually, we have Chair Gould and Canyon Sayers Roots. And I think we'll start with Professor Carrillo to talk a bit about the Ohlone process that happened here.
Hello. I am Jo Carrillo. I am a professor of law, and I'm the faculty director of the Indigenous Law Center here at the college.
Louder, please.
I am Jo Carrillo, and I am professor of law and faculty director of the Indigenous Law Center here at the college. I've been on this faculty for 32 years. I came here to teach federal Indian law and property law. I spent 1 year at Stanford Law School teaching federal Indian law and property law. I was the first person to teach that course at, I believe, both schools. And I taught those courses until somewhere around 2005. As you can imagine, it's a very difficult and sad, difficult course. That was a long time to do that, at which point John Leshy came to take over for a while. And when he left, I returned to teaching the course of federal Indian law. So one thing about this college is that it has always offered a course on federal Indian law to our students. The Indigenous Law Program, the vision and goal that we have, as I said, it started in 2021, so it's very recent. The goal that we have is to enhance general legal knowledge about restorative justice, and particularly for California Native Americans, because the textbooks on federal Indian law do not cover what happened in California. That is a huge omission. By 1832, when John Marshall, the Chief Justice of the United States Supreme Court, issued his first opinion affecting the rights of all indigenous peoples on this continent, Santa Clara Pueblo and many of the missions here in California already had a 200-year experience with the Spanish. Nothing was new. And an experience with the Mexican government. Again, nothing new. This has been a very, very, very long journey. And for it to be not in the textbooks is a problem. Now, why isn't it in the textbooks? And this is one of the things that the Indigenous Law Center is trying to understand and really address. Partly, the history from the perspective of, say, someone on the East Coast seems too complex. There were many tribal peoples here in California prior to the Spanish. Not just one large tribal organization along a large territory. And then the Spanish arrived, and there were 200 years of Spanish land law and land grants and large grants. And then the Mexicans who secularized the missions. And so this missionization process, from the perspective of someone who, say, is writing a textbook, just seems too complicated. And so I just want to say that, to my view, that is a major omission in the United States federal coverage of California. And it leads to some of the issues that we heard about on the first panel as well. The Indigenous Law Center sponsors 4 main programs, all of which involve the teaching, the study, and the practice of law, and so far primarily state law. So, well, not necessarily state law. They are, 1, a visiting law professor program. So our first visiting professor was Matthew Fletcher from Michigan State University. He came here to teach one of the first courses ever taught in California on tribal law, not federal law, not state law, not the interaction between them, but tribal law, the law of the peoples. What is it? How does it work? How does it change? How does it grow? And how is it still living? Because it is. Our second visiting law professor is Lindsay Robertson, who is the former chair of the American Indian Law and Policy Center at the University of Oklahoma. Oklahoma is a very, as we all know, very indigenous space. And so Lindsay is bringing that information here, and I'm teaching a class with him this semester, which I'll talk about. And he's very much saying, well, in Oklahoma, we do it this way, but this is in Oklahoma. So you do it that way there. There are large tribal groups and they have a lot of power, and same in New Mexico or maybe other states. But here is a very different situation, and it's not that any solution can fit everywhere in terms of opening up lines of communication and also acknowledgement. So we also have an affiliated scholar program. We bring in active scholars to meet our students, to work with our students. We have a summer job placement program, which is something that the deans spoke about. So we placed 4 students this summer in rural areas in Northern California to work on issues ranging from ICWA self-help publication pamphlets to tribal, working with the tribal courts, And so that was something that we are doing. And we have a recently funded scholarship program. This scholarship program is intended to increase the number of Indigenous law students. It's still, and that could really happen. And this is very good. We need to do that. And lawyers and professors. And so it's with this new inclusion, I think, and acknowledgement that that's what we can do, and that is the program that we are working on. We operate on a very modest budget. We have a few private donors, but by and large, it's the dean that funds this program. And we started last year with a first class called American Indian Law Land Acknowledgements. So we studied all of the and I co-taught that course with Dr. Jonathan Cordero, who is the Matush of the Ramaytush Ohlone organization. We studied every apology that anyone has made to Native American peoples, federal, BIA, and the governor's apology. And from there, we started to ask, because thinking specifically of the governor's apology, it puts quite a lot of weight on the shoulders of private philanthropy. So we began to ask, how can we assist that industry to go ahead and release some funds to help with land back issues, with land access issues, et cetera. And one way, the first way was, well, let's talk about land acknowledgement. Let's talk about the fact that the institutions that are doing land acknowledgements are really newcomers to this land. And so we spent a semester talking about land acknowledgements, and Dr. Cordero has given me the permission to discuss the three things I think we did learn, which is, and this is from the perspective of our law students, very few of whom are Indigenous persons. So this is a class being taught to the newcomers and their children, right? Like, who sometimes don't know honestly don't know what happened here. And that's a huge denial. That's a huge gap in their learning. Well, point one, the land acknowledgement is for the acknowledger. It's not for the Indigenous tribe or organization or person. Indigenous people know where their ancestral land is. They don't need newcomers to tell them. Two, the goal of the land acknowledgement is to allow for a land-based relationship that can become personal over time. We start the conversation with, okay, how are we going to write this land acknowledgement? But then over time, we start talking about other things like accountability, respect, care, ceremony, renewal, tribal law. And so the conversation becomes one of inclusion to make it known that there was a history before the state of California came into existence. And the third point is that land acknowledgements should be meaningful. I can't tell you how many times in my home I've sat with my relatives and listened to land acknowledgements, and they're either very insulting or they're kind of funny. Like, this is your land. And someone will say, then why aren't you paying rent? Why don't you give it back? So how do we craft these land acknowledgements that in a way that they actually open up a relationship as opposed to just look like a performance on the part of the acknowledger? And so this is one thing we were doing. And I think that the way that we do craft, the way that we are going to go in this, with respect to the land acknowledgement we're working on, is through the relationship. It's the relationship that matters. This school's relationship with the Indigenous people we're working with, and we will work with. And my last point, do other law schools in California do this relationship intensive work? I think the answer, the evidence is no, they don't. To work in relationship, that's where a lot of growth comes. It takes a lot of time, takes a lot of heart. There's a lot of disagreement. And so one thing in my relationship with Jonathan Cordero is that we've been able to start at point one and really work forward to many other topics. I agree with some things, don't agree with other things, him with me, etc. But we move forward. And then the last thing I'll say is this semester we're teaching, co-teaching with Curtis Berkey practicing attorneys, some of whom represent the Round Valley Indian tribe. And we're teaching a class called American Indian Law, Enhanced Access to Land. And we're particularly looking at enhancing access to state land for hunting and fishing, because that's missing in many, many cases where people are not able to access that land. So what will come of this? I don't know, because law is very, very slow and detailed, as we learned in the first session. There's so many, little obstacles and definitions and this and that. So it's a very slow process, but we've taken the first step, and humbly, I might add. And I thank you all for listening, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor. We'll now turn it over to Chair Gold and Canyon, if you would like to present at this time.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for inviting us to be a part of this panel. I am the chair of the Confederated Villages of Lashawn Nation. Our tribal territories are on the East Bay side of Yalamu or San Francisco. And we're going to talk about land acknowledgements. I'll talk about it from my perspective and the work that I've done. And then I'll let Canyon talk from her perspective. She's been doing a lot of work. I have a PowerPoint presentation because I don't like being a talking head. So I'm going to share that with you all, if you don't mind. So I like to talk about beyond land acknowledgement when we're doing land acknowledgement. So actually, our relatives in the Pacific have really kept this relationship alive. Specifically our relatives that have come to our territories and asked permission to be on our lands and to acknowledge us in a traditional kind of way, including our relatives from Australia and the Aboriginal people that have started land acknowledgements in their traditional territories by opening up places. And then our relatives to the north in what is now known as Canada. Many of those tribal people have also done land acknowledgement. But what we have known is that land acknowledgements will lose their flavor. It's what I kind of explained to as people saying in rote something like, when we were all forced to say the Pledge of Allegiance in school, when you say it by rote, but you don't know what you mean, or you don't know what you're saying. And so people will say something and talk about the genocide of people on whose land they're on and then move on. It's a checkoff box. And so really beyond land acknowledgement begins to speak about the meaning of creating relationships. And so our tribe has created relationships in our urban territories with cities in different kinds of ways. And so beyond land acknowledgements, not just acknowledging the land, but doing something else that is more powerful, that engages more people. And so we were instrumental with working with City Council to be the first ones, the city of Berkeley, to change all of their signage coming into the city that says, welcome to the city of Berkeley, Ohlone territory. They also pledged to doing creating a sign or a mural on their streets during the time of the George Floyd uprising, when people across the country were putting up murals that said Black Lives Matters. They also remembered that they are also on our traditional territory and put a mural that says Ohlone territory on their streets as well. The city of Albany followed up, and they also included on their signage saying, welcome to Albany, California, Ohlone territory, acknowledging that they are on stolen land, that they have created a working relationship with the Confederated Villages of Lashawn, looking at different ways of working with us in terms of working in the schools, around taking care of land, paying the shumi, which is a honorary tax or a contribution to the work that we do with the Segurite Land Trust, and trying to create programs within the city that actually enhances our visibility, while also educating the public about whose territory they're on. They've also were the first city to fly our flag over their city council hall, their city hall. Tribal members are coming together to increase the visibility of our people on our territory while doing the educational work of land return within these cities, and working with along city council members and their staff to do this incredible work. City of Alameda changed the name of a park to signify our language. Chochenyo Park, this was Andrew Jackson Park, the Indian killer's name first, came together with the city to do massive education during COVID to change this park, to give access to tribal members to the park, to do education with the community and public. And they also were the first city to pay Shumi within our territory. And the city of Richmond created a park in collaboration with tribal members in order to fix a harm that was created. One of our shell mounds was destroyed when they did an overpass very near this land. And our shell mounds are our burial sites. It is one of the basis of the work that the tribe has done for over 25 years in our territory to protect and preserve our burial sites and our ancestral remains. When this site was destroyed almost 20 years ago, this land was here, and they were trying to figure out what they can do. About 6 years ago, right before 5 years ago, they came together with us and the Arts Commission of the City of Richmond to try to design a park like figure that would talk about our history, would include the elements of our territory, but also give the tribe access to actually gather on our territorial lands. And because we are a non-federally recognized tribe, we are not allowed to gather our traditional medicines and basket making materials and tule and all of these other things. And so we worked with the city to grow the things that we would like to have there, to be able to harvest that those medicines and those plants that we need, and to also have access to this land for meetings for the tribe, and to also eventually, when we're out of COVID, to do educational processes with the tribe, with the public as well. We do a lot of stuff around land acknowledgements. People are continuously coming to us to talk about how do we do a land acknowledgement. And I think that when I talk to our to other tribal people in different parts of the country, they said they're looking at California, that California has really been the place where people have started doing land acknowledgements much more than on the East Coast. And this was a few years ago when I talked to my friend in Haudenosaunee territory. And when we started doing this, we started to write things out to people that came to us asking how to implement, to do a land acknowledgement in research and reflection. We asked them to do prior research before reaching out to us for acknowledgement consultation or to review something that their group wanted to do, to consider their own positionality and privilege, their personal familial group's history, do their research to find out whose land they're on, the history of the land and the original people, consider why they're incorporating the land acknowledgement at all. Who does it serve? Is it centering their own voice and experiences, or those of the land's original people? To ask them to consider, are you able to compensate an Indigenous person of the land you're on to present the land acknowledgement? Although we're often receiving high volumes of requests, we can't meet everybody's, and we prioritize the inclusion of Native voices on the territory. We ask them to pay Shumi land tax. We ask them to discuss with their team or consider yourself how you can transform this land acknowledgement into a genuine relationship. Again, looking at relationship building. It's not a one-off. We believe that land acknowledgements are actually a living document, that they should be action-based, and that they should, and once those actions are completed, that the continued relationship is to create more actions. And so that those should be stated so that there's accountability within the relationship. I think it's important to note that although land acknowledgements are important, they're not reparations, and they require actions to coincide with the statement that you're putting out into the world. We ask people to consider what you or your group are bringing to the land acknowledgement, what resources you or your groups are providing to Indigenous people. Are you and or your group paying Show Me land tax? What relationship do you have with this land and its original people? Simply acknowledging occupation or presence on Indigenous land with no other relationship or action can actually recreate extraction and erasure. And so for us, I believe that the way that we approach land acknowledgements is really about relationship building. We've worked with multiple places in our territories to do land acknowledgements and to think about how we can move forward. We're working with nonprofits and theater companies and the A's and the Roots soccer team to do these things, but also to acknowledge that we are here and we've never left our territory. How can we then build a relationship so that we can continue to do the work that we need to do in order to survive for the next 7 generations? What are your responsibilities as people that have now settled in our territory to the land and to the waters in which you occupy? And I'll pass it on to Canyon.
Mishmintuhis. Thank you. Kamsanak Kanis, Rena. I really appreciate your words. Mishmintuhis, Conrakat Canyon, Coyote Woman, Sayers Roots. I am daughter of Honorable Elder Anne Marie Sayers, transitioning into being tribal chairwoman of Indian Canyon Nation, president of our grassroots nonprofit Costanoan Indian Research. And I identify with my California indigenous roots, dominantly in the Mutsun linguistic territory, and still tracing my Chumash ancestry. So there are some spaces where I acknowledge it, some where I'm still accounting for my ancestry. That being said, as a 21st century indigenous community member raised on the land of my ancestors, I recognize how privileged I am raised in Indian Canyon, the only federally recognized Indian country between Sonoma and Santa Barbara along central coastal California. That being said, we are not federally recognized tribally, and similarly, all the conversations that were had, lack of resources, lack of acknowledgement, people don't know we exist. However, I recognize my privilege being on the land where my grandmother's grandmothers have always been, and how Indigenous protocol has been fundamentally acknowledged and followed, because people who want to visit our land to have ceremony, to come up and seek permission to be there and engage in a consensual communicative dynamic with our tribal community. And that is a very beautiful and unique environment that I recognize as a youth that I have been privileged to witness and be raised in. I've been raised in a traditional and intertribal community because Indian Canyon serves as a safe haven for Indigenous people in need of land for ceremony. And so being the daughter of Anne Marie Sayers has afforded me many opportunities, going to public and speaking engagements, building the vernacular as a young youth, and then ironically being tokenized a lot to offer my voice because I sing. So many people would invite our community to do blessings and land acknowledgements. And as Karina voiced, that what is a land acknowledgement if you're just going to acknowledge it? Like my community says, like, I do it. Ask yourself why. So what has informed me in my journey and in this walk of life, I created an LLC called Canyon Consulting. We consult and bridge the gap between Indigenous and contemporary value systems, as well as just a business arm to exist in the 21st century. And what that has done is afforded our community an opportunity to consult and engage in, well, cultural competency trainings, cultural sensitivity trainings, Indigenous insights in communicating with teachers and climate collaboratives and water management procedure circles and governing structures to talk about what does it mean to be on occupied stolen land. And also what does it mean to take steps to decolonize and re-indigenize our approach. That if we honor Indigenous pedagogies, we can strategize sustainable futures. But that means we have to have these difficult conversations about honoring truth and history. We can't just say, oh, it happened, get over it, go forward. We need to recognize the history that has transpired to how we got here to move forward in a good way. And that's by acknowledging these truths and how all of our communities got here together. And when you think about it, if we honor our ancestors and our ancestors, we all Indigenous ancestry to the ancestral homelands of our people. However, if we are not on the homelands of our ancestors, then we are visitors, we are guests. How are we being good community members? Through my journey in life, I've learned that the plants and the animals, they're the first people. We as humans have been given the responsibility to be good stewards, to be good ancestors in training. So that work and those conversations have brought me into circles like this and other spaces to talk about what is a land acknowledgement, and also being Indian Canyon, whenever I'm invited to represent my community, either myself or my community, or acknowledging California Indigenous peoples and these other places, I'll even tell people, I'm like, well, it is kind of appropriate because it's not asking the native peoples of the land to say, hi, you're on my land. It's as a community member that acknowledges the Bay Area as my ancestral homelands, but not ancestral home site, can offer a land acknowledgement. And then I use both my as being a youth and all of the tools and resources that have been afforded to me and my mentors who have informed me ways to get into those conversations, to shift the perspective, to encourage the organizers, the event coordinators, the beings that I encounter to consider what does it mean to honor truth and history and take those steps. And what that led to is cultural competency work. What that has led to is teaching the teachers how to think about Indigenous community members respectfully and humbly, inclusive measures to a land that's beyond just a statement or a record. It's opportunities to teach docent, to teachers to, given that our community works around cultural resource management, NAGPRA, CEQA, it's a little painful to just be told, oh, you have to monitor the devastation of the culturally sensitive site, and you should be happy you're included in the process. What does it mean to have that relationship with that organization or the people who are building or impacting that environment? Because it's like, as a cultural monitor, I'm here witnessing the impact to make sure that they follow the rules and regulations, but I no longer have a relationship with them after my task of watching said earth move is engaged and impacted. I need a relationship and engage in community building and bridging with the person or community or organization that is implementing such a permanent structure or environment. Having traditional ecological knowledge be shared by saying Indigenous botanical restoration, help our pollinators, to help our plant relatives, to have cultural easements, access and harvest these spaces, because as it was brought up, in the Bay Area, we don't have access to our cultural resources, our living landscapes, our cultural soundscapes. It's deeply impacted. It's a relationship. Like many of our communities have relationships with state parks and private landowners, but that's a relation, that's a person to person. And sometimes turnover or those opportunities will shift, those dynamics will shift, and that person is no longer holding that position. Then all that is starting over. And just because we're not federally recognized tribally doesn't mean we don't exist. And also, when we're considering the inclusive measures, the verbiage of inclusivity, there are times that similarly, when Colleen voiced inclusive phrasing or exclusive or means of not allowing all people or communities to be included in conversation, some land acknowledgements and some non-indigenous organizations acknowledge tribal bands or groups that are exclusive. And the consultations our community engages in, we want to be sure that many people who trace their ancestry to the Bay, yeah, and they are indigenous descendants to these lands, and they may not be affiliated with tribal bands or organizations, and it doesn't demean them or doesn't negate that they have ties here. So it isn't just a single group that is, these are the ancestral homelands of this group. Now, there are many people who trace their ancestry that are the original peoples and descendants of the original peoples. So inclusive verbiage, because acknowledgement is unique there. And so I just really focus on like kind of like that Jedi movement, justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion, but with indigenous perspectives and priorities. So beyond land acknowledgements is exactly as Karina voiced. And how are you considering where it is you are and how you've got to be here? And also just here in California, the territory is the most linguistically dense territory this side of the Northern Hemisphere, which means our communities had different ways of navigating governing structures, societal conduct, communications, protocols, and we need to be inclusive to hear our community. Even if we have diverse perspectives or opinions or approaches, we need to hear all of these things, because I'm always learning about what other communities are doing and also the missteps. I love that our indigenous communities are acknowledging each other, because like when I talked to some people of Canada territory, they voiced how it was just land acknowledgement read in a dry, crass fashion on an index card, just like we acknowledge, la 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 la. And we as community over here can say, without having to do that, we can criticize that and say we need to do better. And then when I witnessed Aboriginal community members of Australia, they say they're leaning to our community and witnessing how we're engaging in consultation and inclusive measures. Our community simultaneously is saying, look what Australia is doing, look what these other First Nations peoples are doing in these other territories, we need to catch up. So we're simultaneously leaning to each other and our Indigenous solidarity of gaining acknowledgement. And I heard earlier when talking about what is the next steps, especially if this charter, after a little while, it's going to take years. We are sovereign nations, and through acknowledgement, we can see each other, recognize each other, and continue practicing our protocols and our methodologies of being good community members and tending our ancestral homelands, being good guests and visitors and settlers on these territories, to ensuring that we are navigating decision-making in an accountable, reciprocal, and humble and appropriate way of being good ancestors in training. And I honor my namesake, being Coyote. I enjoy being in between community members. So I like bridging that gap and having conversations with non-Indigenous community members who are curious what they can do. I don't tell them what to do. I offer insight of what they can consider and potential ideas and steps. So instead of a classroom having a stereotypical make headdresses and have the pilgrim thing and doing the ooh during Turkey Day, or in between the Native American Heritage Month, I tend to call that month Rent Your Token Native Month, and people getting tokenized and called very last minute. I voiced to them relationship building and considerations of consensual consultation of ways to teach the next generation. So one teachers, instead of just going to Wikipedia and non-vetted citable resources, she asked our community, and she created California Indigenous Botanical Bingo and consulted with our Native communities, asking about what cultural information about these plants would be respectful to voice, would be respectful to share with the students if there were any information. And I appreciate that kind of competency and consideration. So that's what I want to voice, how our community offers, like, what is beyond land acknowledgements? Honor truth and history. What does it mean to be a good ancestor in training? Let's have these difficult conversations, and let's consider how all of our communities got to be where we are. And that's inclusive of many nations of settling the Americas in California. So I thank you for your time, and I really hope I made sense there.
Thank you so much to our panelists. We really appreciate it and all of the information. And it feels like we're just skimming the surface here. And so I think this is the beginning of a longer conversation. And we would love to invite you to come back to speak with the panel on all, or the council on all of that and in community. Council members, I'm gonna again ask that you defer conversation until after this next panel, because I want to make sure that the Yuki committee is able to come and speak to their experiences with the UC here. So I'd like to invite those in person to come up, and then I will see about the elder. And what's her name? Oh, great. So I sent a link. Would you like a phone number? Sorry, I put myself right in the way. Yeah, I think feel free to jump right in. Also, if you're joining us later, grab a seat.
Hello, my name is Mono Andason. I'm the vice chair of the Yuki committee. In the past, when we did have a committee, our first president was Ruben Becerra. After that, I became a spokesperson, but I've not been the president. I prefer the seat of the vice chair. The Yuki committee, what worked? The Yuki committee was recognized by resolution by our tribal council. We were able to form that committee. We go through ups and downs, but like families, we work through it, and we prefer to continue staying together and working together. And through those ups and downs, we only grow closer.
Sorry, if folks are going to have conversations, could you please do it outside the room? Thank you.
When I first met the representatives of this school, I was on the board for the Intertribal Sinkyone Wilderness Council. And that group worked with the Legacy Committee, and we began the Restorative Justice Initiatives list. And the best thing there was a unanimous agreement that the Yuki should take lead. So we went to our council and eventually formed that committee. I'd like to say a special thank you to James Ramos, Assemblyman James Ramos. He made sure that we were at the table with the school and the tribal council. He had met with the tribal council and the school and looked around, he said, and didn't see any of the Yuki people. And so they had meetings beginning the following year. We thank him for letting our voices be heard. Also to Christina, we thank you for letting our voices be heard today. We were informed at that meeting in December and this one that it was an invitation only. And so we got Christina to invite us and we do appreciate that. As far as the bill, would like to clarify that there were 12 meetings for the restorative justice, and there were 3, maybe 4 meetings for the name change. And so what didn't work, it took many months from that transition from the Intertribal Sinkyone Wilderness Committee to picking it up through our tribal council and working with this school's representatives. And although the resolution was created and our council were to let anybody in our tribe know that they needed to contact the committee, that was a weak point. And we didn't get the recognition of actually taking lead. The school actually started taking comments and going forward with information from tribelets, families within tribelets of the Yuki people and non-recognized people, tribes. We had to be a federally recognized group for the school to work with us. And that's how we came about having that resolution from our tribe so that we could be heard. At the consultation, we suggest if you go through a consultation that there be a trained, disinterested facilitator, agree on baseline rules and the process. It's important to have minutes. I know when with the Intertribal Sinkyo and Wilderness Council, we worked with the Navy and it took months, but we did get minutes agreed upon before we kept moving forward. I take my own notes so I know what happened. So you agree on the process. Equal representation at the table is important. The Yukis were allowed one person to represent us when it came to the restorative justice initiatives, as well as the name change. And with the restorative justice initiatives, it would have been nice for those items that the school has worked on, like the website and the commemorative area in the school, as well as the Indian law studies, that the Yukis had some input. We did say that we would like a short-term course. We understand they have them and they sort of rotate. One of the alums let us know. And it should be about their founder and how it came about for the Yukis to be even at the table. As far as the name change, we tried to work towards Poinom. The name means one people. Had we known when we talked with the Malekma, if we knew what their name meant, perhaps that should have been the name of the school, because it is very, very similar. And a comment that Vice Chair Myers had met. The school actually voted on the name change in November of 2021, I believe. It was unanimous. And so all this footwork we did in 2022 was for what some people feel it was a show. It really came back to what their unanimous decision was in using San Francisco. I can only say for myself, from my heart, that there was no healing. Truth fluctuated. Healing was the first thing that we asked for. And we hope that we get invited to the signing of the AB 1936 bill. As we were told, it's invitation only. As we were told, this was invitation only. And I'd like to pass the mic off to Deb Pat.
First of all, I should tell you that Yuki is not our name for ourselves. It's a Wintu word meaning enemy. And that's what we got left with. At the time of contact, there were 6 tribelets that composed the Yuki tribe. And we are as President Russ said, we are the only indigenous tribe to Round Valley and the surrounding territory. We also work with the Mendocino National Forest on preserving our ARC sites and protecting them, which we don't get down in our reservation. We had 23 village sites down in the valley and they're not getting protected. Anthropologists say that we've been here for over 12,000 years. They found 2 Clovis points, and Clovis is supposed to be the oldest man. They found 2 Clovis points that are in our territory. As President Russ also said, our tribal government is made up of 7 seats for all the different tribes that have come in there. And for the Talawa council member here, your Talawa people were also there in Round Valley, but they ran home. And so they're not part of our confederated tribes. The 7 seats do not represent the 7 tribes that are there. The indigenous Yuki tribe does not get an honorary seat. We don't get to speak up for our sites. We had to fight for the right to work with the National Forest to protect the sites that are in the National Forest. When the atrocities happened in Round Valley, we were the only tribe that was there. The other tribes were not forced into our valley yet. Our president brought up Benjamin Madley's book, which Jason is putting into digital form. Yes. And if you go to Round Valley and you hit those buttons of all the massacres that happened there, those are only Yukis because we were the only ones there. But we didn't get to be as involved as Dean Fagman says. We weren't that involved. Their website makes it sound like it. We worked with them. We didn't work with them. They already had things down of what they wanted to do. And then they would come back up and tell us, oh, we're going to do these things for you. And they started working on all those initiatives before they were even passed in the bill. And as Mona said, we had to fight for our right just to sit there. And if it wasn't for Assemblyman Ramos, the only Native American in our California legislature, he brought us to the table so that we could have a voice. But the decisions were all made up. We didn't, the initiatives that we put forth that we thought would help our Yuki people were not accepted. We thought maybe having our own Yuki school where we could learn our language, learn our culture back again. Our culture or the truth is not even taught in our own schools. And we're right there in Round Valley, and they don't teach us. The first language that they learned in the school was Wailaki. And we had to work to find somebody accredited to be able to teach Yuki, but they didn't the other way. Anyway, it's been, for the Yuki, we've been in here when Hastings massacred us and the other tribes were forced into our valley. We became the minority in our own valley. So that's why it's been so hard for us to speak up and be heard, protecting our sites, protecting our resources, our water up there, our beautiful land up there, being destroyed by a lot of Mexican cartels that are coming up there. Anyway, it's been something that our ancestors must have really been hurt by, because we were more enemies at that time. Now we're all intermarried on the reservation, but back then they weren't, and our ancestors must have had to put up with a lot more. Yes, it was disappointing that we didn't get Poinome in as a name. We couldn't convince them that they would be ahead of the game and ahead of other UC area, other schools in changing names. And the mode in San Francisco Valley, this area has always been changing all these names. And I'll move, let Nicole talk about how we tried to convince them that San Francisco was definitely not the name to choose.
Hey Tanani, Sintama, hail, hail. My name is Nicole Whipple. I'm a Round Valley tribal member and a Yuki descendant. I'm also Maidu, Pomo, Little Lake Pomo, and Concal. I was asked by a relative to join the Yuki committee, and I had some, I decided to join. When I decided to join, I got filled in from Deb and Mona of the things that were going on. I went to tribal council meetings and listened in. And one of the first things that, was brought to mind was, I heard from the tribal council, we're going through these negotiations with Hastings. And so I decided, okay, I'm interested. I'm a law student. I'm studying law at, in my master's degree through the University of Oklahoma. I'm interested. I want to be involved. I need to get past my own ignorance and be involved with my community and my family and uphold my father's legacy and my grandfather's. So the first thing that really bothered me was that, you know, when I went to the tribal council, what didn't work for me was that, you know, we were told, you know, like Deb and Mona had both explained that, you know, there was this initiative moving forward for the Yuki people. In honor of the Yuki people, UC Hastings was taking down the name of Hastings, or they wanted to take down the name of Hastings, but they were not acknowledging the Yuki people. We were told, you guys are not sovereign. You're not sovereign, so you don't get to be at the table. The sovereign are the Round Valley Indian tribes. Well, like Mr. Russ had shared, they unanimously decided to create by tribal resolution a Yuki committee. And that's one of the things that, as we're here working with the Truth and Healing and trying to learn how to move our policies forward, is that there was no understanding with the college that we work by resolution. And even within our own community, that was something that was like, you know, we had to bring forward, was that, wait, there's a resolution says you are a Yuki committee and you are under the sovereign tribe. So we had to bring that forward first to even get one person at the table. After that, there became principles. So only those principles, only certain people were allowed to be a part of that conversation. When I came onto the board, we were invited to a meeting with the dean, Assembly Ramos, and we were given this invite. That day, the internet went down, and in Round Valley, we've been struggling with our internet services. So here I am thinking, oh, I'm gonna lounge at home and get on this meeting. I'm gonna listen, I'm gonna learn. Well, when I couldn't get on, I thought, oh, must be my internet. I better go down to the tribe and see who's down there meeting. At that time, I was in contact with the rest of our committee and realized that we were being blocked. We were not invited to attend, and only one was allowed to attend. So I went into the meeting, and thankfully our tribal council, you know, I was thinking, oh, we're getting blocked, so I'm hiding in the back. Can I stay? Can I stay? I promise I'll just be quiet. I'll just listen. I'll just sit back here. They told me, no, come up to the table. Come sit at the table with us. So I said, okay. Well, this caused a, you know, friction between the rest of our committee members who were kicked off, because thankfully we have members, April, in San Francisco. We have members, you know, throughout California who are involved, who are listening, who are speaking on our behalf. They were all blocked off. So there was that animosity, like, well, how did you get in? Well, tribal council said, no, you come to the table. So that day is the day when, you know, we plan on moving forward with San Francisco as the name change. They told us unanimously, we will take Hastings down. We're striking the name. Question was asked, what do you plan on changing it to? We plan on San Francisco. That day, I dropped the bomb and said, no, San Francisco doesn't work for me. What you're doing is, I thankfully and so graciously so thankful for you, because never in my lifetime would I think that my father's tribe, or, you know, would ever experience any acknowledgement or be brought, you know, this justice. But San Francisco, now here I am, a person of many tribes who all have suffered. Every one of my tribes have suffered. I can't sit here and say San Francisco works for me, knowing that San Francisco is representing the entire state of California's genocide. So I don't agree. Moving, you know, immediately, you know, here we are again, tribal council, 2 Yuki committee people, members on board with these UC Hastings and all of their staff, lawyers, you know, Assemblyman Ramos and all of his staff, very well educated and experienced in these policies and processes, were telling us, no, San Francisco's named after a saint. I'm like, okay, so this is what has become wrong in the process, is that, you know, we have a group of alum that we speak with that are in support of us, restorative justice, I forget their entire accountability committee. And, you know, they bring it forward, you know, they're like, no, this, you know, all of these initiatives, none of them are for you. None of them speak directly to the Yuki. They're for everybody else and the students, the court, the moot court, the, you know, the offering of the classes, the offering, everything that they offer is for UC Hastings students, not for the Yuki. And we still haven't even got our Yuki history told or, you know, submitted yet to them. For me, I'm like, I'm going to go to that school. I want to. But then there's some of us who don't want to study law. You know, there's plenty of us who don't want to study law, who don't want to go to UC Hastings maybe. So how do we provide restorative justice to them? You know, yesterday we were talking about, you know, I have Brother Cass, Mike Duncan, we had our Aloni brother, we had Uncle Dean talking about some of us don't heal in the same way. Some of us heal with our culture. Our culture isn't in a law school. Our culture isn't in education. Okay. But our language is our culture. So in our restorative justice committee, you know, afterwards, I was feeling the hurt, I was feeling the pain. Went out, I was on crutches, you know, hurt myself in between. I got 350 signatures from natives, California. We have, you know, in our bill, if you look up our bill, you'll see all of the support that we have, that we're for our language, including the Ohlone people here. And that was our thing, was that we're not trying to disrespect when we're talking about land acknowledgement. We're not disrespecting the Ohlone by asking for a Yuki name to be the renaming of this college that, you know, this was supposed to be about the Yuki. It's, you know, we were saying, hey, let us have this one name. And yes, we will come to you, resolution in hand from our tribal council, supporting anything that you want in your land. But we want this one legislation. And then here we were, what happened wrong again was we had one Ohlone person sitting on the Hastings board. Jonathan Cordero came to our committee. We reached out to Jonathan. We reached out to Chalon. We reached out to the Muwekma. And that one person said, I will never allow your language in my territory. He disrespected our elder. And so this is where those biases come, because he is a staff of UC Hastings. You know, did he wear both, you know, how do you wear both hats and then it be a fair process, a fair consult? So we, you know, we consider the win. We appreciate everything. We appreciate the initiatives, and, you know, the living documents that we live, but it's, for us, it's a 75% win, because that 25% was language discrimination that occurs for all of us. And I don't, you know, and one of the things that I must share is that, you know, I really hurt me that in this process, because here we are, Truth and Healing, trying to change the process and way that we deal with policy. As of now, the policy says, yes, when in negotiations with tribal people or tribal tribes, you must, to be a sovereign, you have to be federally recognized. We are the federally recognized tribe that were brought into this process. Not that I agree with it, but that's how it stands today. And so moving forward, you know, when they brought in this one Ohlone against the rest of them, you know, it hurt my heart to say, you know what, by standards, they're not even federally recognized, so they shouldn't even be at the table. Not that I agree, because I don't agree with tribal enrollment and that our tribal people should be disenrolled. I don't believe that they should be, I don't believe that they should be ostracized. are having, we are the only people that have to prove we are Native American. And just to move forward, I really, really have to share this with you about land acknowledgement is that, Jonathan Cadora also came to us about us disregarding a code. He has some kind of code. I don't know if it's invested in UC Hastings or they wrote it or what, but for me, from my learning, and I know that we all have different teachings, land acknowledgement was for our ancestors and the people so that we didn't disturb them. So that when we went to other people's, we knew that their people were buried, their ancestors were here, and we didn't disturb them and carry them and move them to other places. It wasn't about, I need to have my name placed on a building to be acknowledged. But I do appreciate everything in this presentation because these are the things that we are working on and want to see at home as well. So thank you.
Thank you to the panel, and I apologize for the short time, but I think we're only in this room for a bit longer and then some folks have to go. So I do want to start public comment. For those of you who've submitted public comment cards, I know that typically we would give you 3 minutes, but if you could go as quickly as possible, that would be best. So we'll start with Edwina Lincoln.
Hi, my name's Edwina Lincoln and I'm from Round Valley, and I'm the daughter of the Yuki people. My grandmother was the last shaman in Round Valley. I just want to say we're talking about truth and healing roots and right. No, I'm here because I want to know the history, and if I can, everything that was brought forth with Round Valley and the Yuki people are not really true. Because I tried from the beginning to get involved and to know my whole beginning was let's get a vote to the Yuki people. Let the Yuki people know what's going on. They need a voice. It wasn't mine. I wanted the people to have a voice, and that never did happen. And to this day, it never happened. But things keep rolling and rolling. Doors were closed, weren't invited. I sat on the committee. I didn't have a voting right, all the stuff that happened, but I continued to fight and strive because those are my ancestors. I listen to the babies cry. I hear the people screaming as this history is still happening on the reservation, and every Indian person that knows that lives on the reservation, we as Native people hear that history continue on, and it hurts. It comes from our hearts, our spirits. We got to go pray, we got to go burn medicine, we got to walk the land to help heal our people that were massacred and murdered.
Thank you. We'll turn now to Karina Geary.
My name is Karina Geary. I am of the Tamia Nation. Thank you very much. So I just wrote some things down to keep it quick, to keep people on, to stay on track. I know there's a lack of time. So I'm the current chairwoman for Tamia Nation. We're the indigenous tribe of Southern San Francisco Bay Area, mostly Santa Clara Valley area. I'm grateful today for the Truth and Healing Council for bringing all of us here together today, and for the Ramaytush Ohlone tribe for whose land we stand on today. There's a misconception that these are Ohlone nations. We are not one people, just like the Pomo tribes, right? You are several different tribes within those tribes. Sometimes they're linguistic boundaries, and sometimes there's several tribes within those linguistic boundaries. One thing is to understand is California is highly diverse. We are the most diverse linguistic, area in the world. We're only second to New Guinea. So you can have close to 200 languages, dialects, and within those you might have different nations. And so we do not fit into the box when it comes to federal recognition. As Tamia Nation is a non-federally recognized tribe, we understand, a lot of what everybody had to say here today, especially in the beginning. But we missed the beginning. I do apologize for that. Our people in particular were missionized, and we were taken to Mission Santa Clara, Santa Cruz, Mission Dolores, and Mission San Juan Bautista. Because we were taken to those areas doesn't give us rights to those areas, and we are well aware of that. Our tribe has, being Indian growing up, right, we all know we need to do our tribal genealogy, right? It's called pedigree charts. And we know as Indian people, we need to know where we come from, right? Because we're constantly having to prove, even amongst our tribes, to prove who we are, to validate who we are constantly on a daily basis. Our people in particular, we had to hire a tribal genealogist to verify our genealogy, to certify it, so no one could dispute us. And that's difficult for somebody who grew up, our people grew up knowing who we were. We didn't grow up in our homeland because we were pushed out early on, but in a way it kind of saved us because we ended up in a rural area. We have community continuity. We grew up gathering, hunting, fishing. We knew a lot that a lot of people who ended up staying in the Bay Area unfortunately lost. So in a way, it was a blessing. Our tribe had a traditional political system up until 1991. It wasn't until a member wanted to go to school, thought, well, you know what, we're on the judgment rolls, right? We can get BIA money to go to school. Turns out you have to be recognized. We're like, well, what is that? Nobody in the tribe had higher education. They gave us a list, said, join a tribe. So we wrote to several different tribes. One responded. We joined as a band. We were there for 30 years, did a lot of work. I published a dictionary. We just published a 7,000-page text collection for the language. And after 30 years, it just didn't work out. We have a different value system, and we realized we were actually separate nations. So our elders decided, you know what, we're moving forward as an independent nation, as we should have in the first place. And we're being told by outsiders, even other tribal people, you're a pop-up tribe. It's like, our people have been here since time immemorial. And they say, oh, well, you moved out of the area. No, we were pushed out of the area, right? After the mission systems, the ranchos, Mexican ranchos, and then the American, system, minors and policy. We had no other choice to flee for our lives. And it's a miracle that, many of us in this room, most of us, that we even exist today. So we continue to live as Indigenous people, but our ties are also and will always be from the Bay Area, right? From our homeland, from the place we are of, not from. And what I mean by that is even our language and oral history tells us we are of the land. We are the land. In our language, we have a suffix was, and I could say también tacuas, mean I am of the land, I'm of the land. There's no separation. And our oral history also tells us that our deities had a long-winded conversation about what humans were going to look like. And they ended up creating this out of clay from the earth. So we are literally the land. No matter where we go or where we live, we will always be from our homeland of Tamien. So I'm really grateful for Round Valley for sharing their process of renaming Hastings. It's important for us to know what that process is so we can start reclaiming those things. However, this is the land of the Association of the Ramaytush Ohlone and should always be consulted prior to any decisions being made within their homeland. And that goes for every other place. We would not go into somebody else's homeland and rename different places. So if one tribe's federally recognized, I think you can partner and help and say, hey, our people were from this community as well. We want to help because many of our people still live here. How can we work together? How can we help you? And I think it's important to have collaboration and partnership between non-federally recognized and recognized tribes. So today there are over 16 political, what is called Ohlone tribes. Many of them are not on the heritage list for ABT 52 consultation, but that does not affirm nor negate the legitimacy. So I think we need to go back to Indian values, ethics, and Indian law, right? We all have those in our community, and we need to respect each other's boundaries, territories, and work together. So thank you.
Thank you, Karina. And I apologize, we are getting to only 3 minutes left, and we have several commenters that have submitted for comments. This is kind of a hard stop and non-negotiable. So we'll have one or two last commenters, and the rest we invite you to join potentially a follow-up meeting, because we want to make sure that your voices are heard. But again, we have a very hard stop in the next 3 minutes. So I'd like to ask Morningstar Gali if she'd like to speak for a minute.
I'd actually like to waive my time to Mr. James Brown.
Okay, great.
Hello, my name is James Brown from Elam. And you know what? I've been participating in this. I've been watching the Zoom. And I have to say this, is that if there's really going to be truth and healing, I believe California Native people, we need a Holocaust museum. Because all of these stories, every testimony I hear, we all have stories, and they're our own that have to be written. And we need a museum. And matter of fact, Berkeley, Hastings, all of them should give us an endowment to create that museum. because that's where all our stories need to be. And I'd like to tell you that I come from a tribe where I was disenfranchised, half of our tribe. And this is all over greed of gaming, as well as trying to fight for environmental justice. We come from a mercury mine. It polluted the whole Clear Lake. Okay, this mine just spread most of my family have died from mercury poisoning and cancer. Okay, right now, for the past 12 years, we've been politically disenfranchised. Our tribe actually moved to Sonoma County. None of them ever lived on the reservation. What happened was we had an environmental justice issue. We were going to sue the BIA and the US EPA for violating Section 106 of the National Historic Preservation Act. And what they did was the BIA came in and overthrew our elections, and they put this other group in charge. And matter of fact, we have records of this group filing for their own federal recognition. None of that was done. So for the past 12 years, none of our family can vote, become members of the tribe. We have no services, but we have our roundhouses. We're traditional people, and that has been keeping us alive. But it's hard when I have grandchildren that can't even apply to their own tribe for membership, can't apply for help. So being federally recognized, people, I'll tell you, it's not the best also, because we also get too many of our non-traditional leaders involved. And what they do is sell their people out. And I've seen that happen in every situation here, every tribe that has happened. And it's really hard. So I'm opening up a website called the East Lake Tribe, and it'll be this October 1st. I have all the documents to show the land fraud that went on from not only the treaties. Did you know, someone mentions 47 cents an acre, what we got paid? Did you know that the settlement was $46 million for the state of California? But the Bureau of Indian Affairs moved in and they took that money to set up their site. Then the California Indians, it was 46 million. We had to divide up only 5 million. That's why we only got what, 600, some of you guys remember, $660 or something like that? That's what happened. We're always been cheated. Now, the last thing I would like to say is the Christensen Fund. Have you heard of that? They're funding some people here, right? Did you know all their money comes from coal mining? Look it up. Look up these people. We got a lot of people. There's a group here in San Francisco called the Pacific Union Club. Hastings belonged to that club. All these groups belong to them. They're the ones who took all our lands. And see, what we do is end up fighting each other over it. I mean, the lands that we live on, there's a legal term, and I hope the Hastings people will look at this. It's called latches. And that's how they took our land from us, because they said we should have filed it. We knew none of us could even speak English. How could we file a legal document? And that's how they took Rattlesnake Island away from us in 1949. Now, there's another document I'm going to have on this site. It shows the 1906. It gives every tribe in the state of California who they bought your land from. Now, check this out. So what they're saying is white people were here before us, and the BIA has to buy the land from those white people to create those reservations. C.E. Kelsey, the reason why he fought for so-called tribal people was he wanted money from what they call the Civilization Fund. Did you know? Look up the Civilization Fund. Congress created that. And that's where all the missions, all the churches got their funding to come in and create missions and schools on the reservations. He couldn't do that in California. So look him up. He's a Mormon. And that's what C.E. Kelsey was. So every tribe that he created, he put a Christian minister in charge of it. Look it up. So I'm going to post all of this on my website. And I'm sorry I took too much time, but I just wanted to say that. It's a lot of fraud in government, and BIA has never been our friend.
Thank you. We very much appreciate your comments. And I think we are at time. So what we'll do is we have all of the comment cards. We'll reach out to each of you individually and set up a time to see you in person. We can send up a hearing, or we can have you come to a council meeting and prioritize your testimony. So again, thank you all. Please feel free to grab whatever snacks or anything you want on your way out. And then members of the council, I think just come up here and we're going to start heading over. So thank you for those joining virtually. I think In future, we'll probably have to do more extended agendas so we have more time for discussion, but really appreciate all of your joining and have a great weekend.